I had been gravely injured. The blade had missed my heart by only about 2.5 inches, and I remained unconscious for several months before I finally woke. During all that time, Zhang had not visited me even once. Yushan told me that the widow of the late heir of the Xuanyang marquis household had been badly frightened during the flower viewing banquet, and had shown signs of a threatened miscarriage. Zhang was terrified that something might happen to the child. His sister-in-law was carrying, so he had taken leave from court and stayed at home for several days to keep her company. A bitter taste spread across my tongue, but I was not surprised. In Zhang's heart, Shen Zhuoyin had always come first. She was his sister-in-law, but she was also the childhood companion who had grown up beside him even before the heir of the Xuanyang marquis household died. The two of them had been unusually close. Later, when the heir died of illness and left behind Shen Zhuoyin and the unborn child in her womb, Zhang took on the burden of the entire household and became even more protective of her. That was why, whenever Shen Zhuoyin and I had the slightest disagreement, he always sided with her, and that was why, when an assassin rushed toward us with a blade at the flower viewing banquet, Zhang's first reaction had been to shove me away. I had been the person standing closest to Shen Zhuoyin, so he pushed me directly into the attack and stepped in front of her instead. At the memory, the wound in my chest began to ache again. Seeing the weariness between my brows, Yushan assumed I was heartbroken. She went to the dressing table, picked up a jewelry box, and tried to comfort me. "My lady, please don't be too upset. Although the second young master did not come himself, he has still been thinking of you. He ordered someone to bring this entire jade jewelry set to cheer you up." I glanced at the box. Inside lay 12 exquisitely crafted pieces arranged in perfect order. They looked painfully familiar. A year earlier, I had paid a deposit on that very set at a jewelry shop. Early the next morning, the shop returned my deposit in full, because Shen Zhuoyin had also taken a liking to it. Zhang had immediately offered 3 times the price and bought it for her. Back then, I had still held hope for him. Unwilling to accept what had happened, I asked the shopkeeper whether he had told Zhang that the set had already been reserved by eldest young lady Wen of the Wen household. The shopkeeper had looked at me awkwardly. "I did tell him, my lady. But the moment the second young master heard that you had reserved it, he raised his offer even higher." I no longer remembered exactly how I had felt. I only remembered that Zhang and I had a fierce argument afterward. He calmly endured every accusation, watching with cold indifference as I became more and more upset. Only at the end did he say, "Windong, do you not think you're making an ugly spectacle of yourself over a few pieces of jewelry?" Now the same set had returned to me as a reward for taking the knife meant for Shen Zhuoyin. How absurd. I did not look at it again. "Throw it away," I said in a low voice. "And from now on, do not accept anything else he sends." My engagement to Zhang had begun with an accident. 3 years earlier, at Commandery Princess Minghua's invitation, I attended a polo match. During the game, I found myself opposing Zhang, whom I had never met before. I had only recently arrived in the capital and had not yet learned its unspoken rules. Every one of my teammates deliberately went easy on him. I alone played with all my strength. At first, Zhang had not intended to take the match seriously. But when he saw how fiercely I fought, his competitive spirit was stirred. Although my team eventually lost badly, my performance caught the Grand Princess's attention. She said that Zhang and I reminded her of herself and her prince consort when they were young. On the spot, she asked whether the Xuanyang marquis household would be willing to form a marriage alliance with my family. At the time, my father was only an assistant director in the Ministry of Revenue. For our family to marry into a marquis household was an honor that seemed to have fallen from the heavens. The Marquis of Xuanyang, however, remained indifferent. "Zhang is the second son," he said. "He is neither the heir nor in line to inherit the title." He expressed no opinion of his own and merely asked Zhang what he wanted. I was considered fairly pretty, but the capital was filled with beauties as dazzling as peonies. I could hardly have expected to catch the eye of a nobleman. Yet after only a brief pause, Zhang bowed and thanked the Grand Princess for her favor. After that, we saw each other often. For a time we understood each other remarkably well. I had believed that Zhang liked me at least a little. After all, whenever Shen Zhuoyin was not involved, he behaved much like an ordinary fiancé. I could tolerate the small arguments in which he favored her. What I had never imagined was that he would one day nearly cost me my life. I gathered every letter and token Zhang and I had exchanged over the past 3 years and threw them all away. Then, dragging along a body that had only just begun to recover, I went to find my father. Only then did I learn that he had been transferred to Lizhou the previous month and would not return to the capital until the end of the next month. When my stepmother, Madame Luo, heard what I had done, she summoned me to her rooms. For the past several days, belongings had constantly been carried out of listening bamboo courtyard. Anyone with eyes could tell that eldest young lady Wen had quarreled with second young master Song again. Madame Luo had never thought much of me before, and we rarely interacted. Only after I became engaged to Song, Zhang had she begun to treat me differently. Now she assumed I was merely throwing a tantrum. She opened her mouth to urge reconciliation, only to hear me say that I wanted to end the engagement. "Have you gone mad?" she demanded. "Do you have any idea what kind of family the Shuing Marquis household is? Countless people would do anything to form a connection with them. Yet you want to break off the engagement?" She stared at me as though I had committed an unforgivable crime. Song Zhang pushed me into a blade and nearly killed me. "Do you still expect me to marry him and wait for him to do it again?" Madame Luo's expression stiffened. On the day of the flower viewing banquet at Prince Chong'an's residence, her own daughter had been seriously ill, so Madame Luo had been unable to attend. She knew there had been an assassination attempt, but she did not know what had truly happened. Her surprise lasted only a moment. "It could not have been that serious," she said dismissively. "He probably acted carelessly in the confusion. Besides, you did not die. After this, the second young master will surely feel guilty. He can make it up to you little by little. You must not throw away such a fine fiancé over a moment of foolishness. Since Madame thinks he is so wonderful, would you dare kneel before the Buddha and pray that Anzin will one day marry a man exactly like him?" Madame Luo's face changed at once. I continued, "If you truly dare to ask the Buddha to give Wenzhen a husband with Song Zhang's character, then I, Wendong, will obediently wait for my wedding and never mention ending the engagement again." Wenzhen was only 6. Madame Lu cherished her like a jewel in her palm. The only reason she wanted me to marry into the Marquis household was so that she could later borrow its influence to raise her daughter's status and secure a powerful marriage for her. "If you do not want to marry him, then do not," she snapped guiltily. "Why drag your younger sister into it?" She hurriedly changed the subject. "In any case, I cannot decide whether the engagement is cancelled. The Grand Princess arranged it herself. If you insist on ending it, go ask Her Highness to withdraw her command." I ignored her mocking tone. It was indeed the most direct solution, but I was merely the daughter of a 5th-rank official. How could I demand an audience with an imperial princess? The Grand Princess had also been seriously ill for years and lived in seclusion deep within the palace. Even Minghua found it difficult to see her. My only option was to wait until father returned and ask him to submit a petition. That night, I wrote to Li Zhou. I explained everything that had happened at the flower viewing banquet and made clear my determination to end the engagement in the days that followed. I recovered while waiting for father's reply. Once Madame Luo realized I had truly made up my mind, she returned to her former contemptuous behavior. Claiming that an injured person should eat lightly, she ordered the kitchen to send me nothing but plain rice porridge and vegetables at every meal. I had no choice but to use my own money to open a small kitchen for listening bamboo courtyard. One day, Yushan hurried back from a restaurant, her expression full of mystery. "My lady, something serious has happened at the Xuanyang Marquis residence. Did an assassin stab Song Zhang? Was the wound so severe that he died before the physician arrived?" "Of course not, why would you think that? What a pity," Yushan muttered under her breath for a moment before explaining. The previous day, second young Master Song and the late heir's widow had gone to a fair. They were separated in the crowd, and she was accidentally knocked down. Her pregnancy had already been unstable, and the fall made the situation even more dangerous. Every famous physician and midwife in the capital had been summoned to the Marquis residence. Yushan's voice gradually filled with resentment. The second young master was frantic. He even begged His Majesty to send every imperial physician from the Imperial Medical Bureau. When your life was in danger, he was not half so anxious. He did not even visit you once. No wonder you want to end the engagement. I no longer cared about his concern for Shenju Yin. I only found one thing strange. At the flower viewing banquet, Shenju Yin had been 4 months pregnant. More than 3 months had passed since then. She should have been resting quietly. Why had she gone to such a crowded fair? Fortunately, the child was saved. More than half a month had passed since I sent my letter, yet father had still given no reply. I was preparing to write another when Madame Lu suddenly sent for me. A senior housekeeper hurried into the courtyard and immediately ordered the servants. "Dress the young lady quickly, put more powder on her face to hide how ill she looks." Second young master Song is waiting in the front hall. Ever since deciding to end the engagement, I had grown calmer by the day. All the resentment of the past now seemed distant and insignificant. I had thought I would be able to face Song Zhang without emotion. But the moment I saw him, I seized the nearest teacup and hurled it straight at his head. The porcelain cup shattered on the floor. Blood immediately trickled from Song Zhang's forehead. "Donger, have you lost your mind?" Madame Luo shot to her feet in terror. Her face drained of color. She repeatedly ordered someone to fetch a physician. Song Zhang stood as straight and composed as ever. He had not dodged. He merely waved away the servants, calmly took out a handkerchief, and wiped the blood from his brow. "Wendong, how dare you injure your own fiancé?" Madame Lu scolded. "Since when has the Wen family taught you to behave this way?" Donger was only following someone else's example. I raised my head and looked directly at Song Zhang. "So I am not allowed to do that." Madame Luo was both horrified and disgusted by my sarcasm. Song Zhang had come to the house that day, and she had hoped to use the opportunity to mend our relationship. She had even ordered the maids to make me look especially beautiful. She had never imagined that I would attack him the moment we met. Song Zhang gently intervened on my behalf. "Donger has been ill for a long time and has suffered much frustration. I was slow to visit her, so it is only natural that she resents me." "Second young master, you are truly broad-minded," Madame Luo said eagerly. "It is all my fault for failing to discipline her properly. Please do not. Madame Donger and I have not seen each other for many days. Would you allow us to speak alone?" Song Zhang cut her off. Madame Lu had no choice but to leave. Before she did, she gave me a vicious glare. Once only Song Zhang and I remained in the hall, I decided there was nothing to say and turned to go. "Are you still angry?" A strangely aggrieved look crossed his face. "Do you know that, from childhood until now, no one has ever dared injure me even slightly?" He meant that allowing me to strike him with a cup had been an enormous act of indulgence. "And from childhood until now, no one has ever tried to take my life." I forced down my anger. "If you wanted to protect Shen Zuoyan, you should have taken the knife yourself. What right did you have to push me into it? Do not claim you acted carelessly in the chaos. Everyone there saw how dangerous the situation was. You never intended to let me live." Song Zhang frowned, his voice turning cold. "Do not make it sound so ugly. A yin is pregnant. The child in her womb is the only bloodline my elder brother left behind. You should understand how important that child is to the Song family. Besides, you are the future daughter-in-law of our household. Is protecting the family's eldest grandson not your duty?" He spoke as though it were the most natural thing in the world. For a moment, I was too stunned to answer. Seeing my silence, he sighed. When he spoke again, his tone softened. "I did not think the matter through. If you still resent me, you may vent your anger on me later, but I did not come today to argue. His Majesty has ordered me to oversee flood control in Ganzhou. Ayan's pregnancy is still unstable, and I will be away for a long time. I want you to visit the Marquis residence often and care for her in my place." "Song Zhang, you truly are despicable." Before he could finish, I slapped him hard across the face. It was always like this. Every time I tried to face him calmly, he pushed me to the edge of losing control. Song Zhang was frighteningly composed. He looked down at me with cold indifference. "Wendong, I admire your unwillingness to yield. But I hope you understand that you will one day be the wife of the heir. If you continue to behave so willfully, your future will not end well." "Could any ending be worse than the one I have now?" I shouted, no longer able to contain myself. "Song Zhang, I will never marry you, and I do not want the wretched affection you call liking me." The air seemed to freeze. The calm in Song Zhang's eyes slowly turned to ice. "So that is it. You still have not given up." A cold smile curved his lips. He took a letter from his sleeve. "This letter to Lizhou was intercepted at the courier station by your stepmother and handed to me." Pity appeared in his eyes, as though he were watching prey struggle uselessly. "Foolish Donger. Do you truly believe that persuading Lord Wen would allow you to end this engagement? Have you forgotten that the Grand Princess granted it with her own words?" I answered. "Under the laws of our dynasty, if one party commits a serious crime before the marriage, the other has the right to dissolve the engagement. An imperially granted engagement may be different, but His Majesty is benevolent and broad-minded. If I explain the circumstances clearly and appeal to his compassion, there is still a chance." "A serious crime? What crime have I committed?" "You deliberately pushed me into a blade that was attempted murder." Interest flickered in Song Zhang's eyes. "Perhaps you do not know that the assassin who aimed at Ayan did so because Prince Chong'an happened to be standing behind her." The scene was chaotic. Other than Ayan and me, no one knew why you were the one injured. While you were recovering, Prince Chong'an wondered why you had been wounded when you had been standing far from him. I told him you rushed forward to protect him. He reached out and gently stroked my hair. No one else witnessed the truth, and I even gave you credit for risking your life to save a prince. Tell me, Donger, what crime have I committed? I felt as though I had fallen into an icy abyss. Once again, I experienced the despair of being shoved toward a blade with no way to escape. But Wendong, even if I had not twisted the truth, you still could not end this engagement. It was granted by a royal relative, and the household you are meant to marry into is tied to the imperial clan. What blocks your path is neither morality nor law. He advanced until he was close enough to bend beside my ear. It is royal power. I drew a sharp breath, my nails dug deep into my palms. Song Zhang straightened slightly and calmly watched my face grow pale. After a moment, he abruptly changed the subject. I heard you threw away the jade jewelry set I gave you. I had craftsmen remake it from the beginning. It was not the old set. It seems you are still angry, simply because you refuse to wear something similar to another woman's. His gaze fell to my white knuckles. Patiently, he loosened my fingers one by one, then placed something hard and warm in my palm. I carved this jade pendant myself. There is only one in the world, and it is for you alone. Song Jiang's handsome eyes curved with the tenderness of a man bestowing a favor. You are not angry anymore, are you? He brushed my cheek with his fingertips. His voice was calm, yet allowed no refusal. Donger, this is the first time I have hurt you, and it will be the last. Stay quietly at home and wait for the wedding. When I return from the flood control mission and my elder brother's mourning period is over, I will marry you at once. I stood rigid before him, unable to speak, while he arranged my future as he pleased. After a long while, I gave a quiet, self-mocking laugh. Song Zhang, you have always seen me as a toy, haven't you? That is why you can value Shinjuan more yet still claim to like me. That is why you do not care whether I live or die. Song Zhang considered the question seriously for a moment. And if I do, Madame Lu soon used the excuse that my wound had not fully healed and I needed rest. She ordered that until father returned to the capital, I was not to take a single step outside listening bamboo courtyard. She insisted that even if the letter reached father, he would agree with her and refuse to cancel the engagement. Her reason was simple. The Wen family could not afford to offend the Xuanyang Marquis household. Not long afterward, Song Zhang departed for Ganzhou. Before leaving, he specifically sent a warning that I must keep the jade pendant safe. Otherwise, even he did not know what he might do. Because of that threat disguised as concern, I had no choice but to leave the pendant on my desk. Yushan saw how unhappy I was each day and could hardly bear it. My lady, please try to think positively, she said with a forced smile. You will still become the wife of the Marquis household's heir. The second young master even carved a pendant himself to comfort you. It shows that he knows he was wrong. Knows he was wrong? I laughed bitterly and stared at the white jade, whose edges had not even been polished smooth. The apology was false. The threat was real. It was nothing more than the familiar tactic of hurting someone, and then offering a small kindness to placate them. A warning that I should know my place. Had it not always been this way? Whether I was jealous because he favored Shen Zhouyin or angry because he deliberately took something I loved, if I refused to bow my head, he would become distant and cold. After enough time passed, he would arrive with gifts and soothe me with pleasant words. And every single time I was easily appeased by it. For a long time, our endless conflicts created the illusion that I was still free to live according to my own will. I had forgotten that Song Zhang and I had never once stood as equals. He had never apologized to me. He simply still found this toy amusing. So he tolerated my willfulness, and when the mood struck, entertained himself by teasing me. Song Zhang had said my struggle was useless because supreme royal power stood in my way. But if royal power was truly so terrifying, why did he treat me like dirt? Why did he consider my life worth nothing? The contradiction lodged in my throat. I could not understand it, and I could barely swallow food. When Madame Lu heard, she assumed I intended to starve myself in protest. She stormed into listening bamboo courtyard with several servants. Without explanation, they held me down and tried to force food into my mouth. Wendong, years ago you insisted on showing off, and that is how you obtained this marriage far above your station. Who are you pretending to be pitiful for now? Madame Lu mocked coldly. The second young master lowered himself to make peace with you. You should know when you have been favored. Do not accept such an enormous advantage and then continue putting on airs. Anger surged through me. Since Madame envies me so much, why not marry him in my place? You have kept your beauty well. A fine man like Song Zhang would surely treat you kindly. Madame Luo's face went livid with rage. She shouted at the elderly attendant beside her. The eldest young lady speaks insolently and shows no respect for the mistress of the household. Slap her until she comes to her senses. The elderly attendant rolled up her sleeves and rushed at me. Yushan cried out in alarm and threw herself in front of me, only to be shoved hard to the floor. Madame Lu. I stared at my stepmother, my voice as cold as ice. If you truly want me to marry into the Marquis household, then you know I will become the heir's wife. Are you certain you want to offend me today? The old woman's hand swept close enough for the wind to brush my cheek. At the same moment, Madame Lu shouted sharply. The thin hand froze in midair. Madame Lu glared at me darkly and forced the words through clenched teeth. Very well. Since you have no appetite, there is no need to waste food by sending it to listening bamboo courtyard for the time being. She gave me one last furious look and swept away. Yushan hurriedly crawled to my side, tears pouring down her face. My lady, do not be afraid. Master will return soon. Once he learns how harshly Madame has treated you, he will never forgive her. Exhausted in both body and spirit, I struggled upright. Father had always been stern and uncompromising, but he had never treated me badly. If he learned that Zhang had deliberately caused my injury, he would certainly be furious. Yet Madame Lu was right about one thing. The Xuanyang Marquis household wielded overwhelming power. The Wen family could not afford to provoke it. What if, after his anger passed and he weighed the consequences, Father also chose Madame Lu's side? What would become of me then? Prince Chong'an has come to the residence in person. Just as despair and exhaustion threatened to swallow me, Madame Lu's nearly shrill cry rang out from beyond the courtyard. A servant immediately followed with an urgent report. Madam, it is true. His Highness said that he is grateful because the eldest young lady risked her life to protect him at Prince Chong'an's flower viewing banquet. He has come personally to express his thanks. Prince Chong'an Xiaohuang could be summed up in one phrase: extravagant, decadent, and devoted to pleasure. It was said that while the late emperor lived, Xiaohuang had been his favorite son. The late emperor had even considered making him heir to the throne. Unfortunately, the prince had no interest in government and cared only for indulgence. With no other choice, the late emperor made Prince Hui the crown prince. When Prince Hui ascended the throne at only 14, he trusted his elder brother completely. The new dynasty was still unstable, and the two brothers had been forced to share the burden and support each other. Now that the emperor sat securely upon the throne, Prince Chong'an had withdrawn after completing his task and resumed his life of pleasure. Perhaps he had restrained himself for too long while helping his young brother, because in recent years his extravagance and excess had become notorious. Memorials accusing him of misconduct fell before the throne like snow. Yet His Majesty, remembering their brotherly bond, continued to protect and indulge him. Everyone in the realm knew that Prince Chong'an was eccentric, domineering, and entirely unconcerned with rules at the flower viewing banquet. I had glimpsed him from a distance. His beauty was striking and his natural authority made others afraid to look at him directly. Before I went out to greet him, Madame Luo warned me sternly. He is an imperial prince. Why would he truly lower himself to visit a young woman like you? He must be using this opportunity to win over your father. When you meet him, do not speak unnecessarily. I agreed without argument, but another plan had already formed in my mind. If royal power was what prevented me from ending my engagement, then I would use royal power to break the deadlock. If Prince Chong'an had accepted the false credit that I had saved him, I might as well take advantage of the situation and ask him to grant me the favor of ending the engagement. Once outside, I deliberately made myself look as weak and pitiful as possible. Taking a deep breath, I staggered slowly around the screen. I Wendong, pay my respects to your highness. Good heavens, look at this poor girl. Before I could complete the bow, Xiao Huang cried out dramatically. His exaggerated tone left everyone stunned. He carefully examined me from head to toe and said with apparent distress, "Look at that little face, white as paper. Look at those wrists, thin as twigs, and those lips. There is not a trace of color in them." He pretended to support my arm, then turned toward Madame Luo. His voice suddenly sank. "Madame Wen, did you truly summon a competent physician to treat this young lady?" Madame Luo was still recovering from her shock. When he addressed her, she hurriedly answered, "Yes, Your Highness. We did. Her internal organs were injured, so she cannot recover in a day or two. The physician said she only needs careful rest." "What?" Xiao Huang thundered. "She has rested until she looks like this, and you still say she merely needs more rest. What a pack of useless fools. How dare they delay the treatment of the person who saved my life?" He turned abruptly toward me and leaned slightly closer, looking directly into my eyes. "Miss Wen, a renowned wandering physician happens to be staying at one of my estates. Why not move to my residence and recover there until you are completely well then?" With astonishing speed, he added in a voice only I could hear. This is Lord Wen's wish. My heart gave a violent beat. Before I could answer, Madame Lu hurriedly objected. Your Highness, that is absolutely impossible. Dong'er is unmarried. If she moves into a prince's residence without proper reason, people will gossip. Besides, she is not truly that weak. With a little more time, she will certainly recover. Dong'er, is that not so? As she spoke, she shot me a sharp warning glance. In truth, I was completely confused. Instinctively, I looked to the man before me for help. Xiao Huang merely watched me calmly. His gaze seemed to say that the decision was mine. I could not fully trust him, but he had mentioned father. There had to be a reason. And if I remained imprisoned in the Wen residence, I would be doing nothing but waiting for disaster. My thoughts turned rapidly. I lowered my head and answered in a thread-like voice. To receive your Highness's favor fills me with fear and gratitude. Yet Madame's concern is reasonable. This matter cough might damage your Highness's reputation. Besides, my health cough only appears frightening. Even without a renowned physician cough. Before I finished, I covered my mouth with a handkerchief and began coughing violently, as though I might cough up my insides. Madame Luo's eyes widened. Only moments earlier in listening Bamboo Courtyard, I had been sharp-tongued enough to argue fiercely with her. How had I suddenly become a dying invalid? She pressed her lips together and prepared to explain. But Xiao Wang did not give her the chance. He sighed heavily, his face full of regret. If I had not been occupied with trivial affairs these past few days, I would have searched the entire realm for a physician to repay such a great kindness. Who could have imagined that my benefactor would be neglected to this extent? He suddenly raised his head and fixed Madame Lu with an icy gaze. If I truly followed Miss Wen's advice and stood by while this happened, it would not merely damage my reputation. People throughout the realm would speak ill of the entire imperial family behind our backs. Madame Luo was speechless. She had barely said anything, yet somehow she had been accused of shaming the imperial family. Her face went pale. Then, please allow me to write to Li Zhou and ask my husband first. I cough. Xiao Huang raised a hand to his forehead. His shoulders trembled faintly. After several breaths, he regained his composure and issued a decisive order. Miss Wendong's condition is critical. There can be no delay. We leave for my residence immediately. He allowed Madame Lu no further protest, slipping one arm lightly around my shoulders. He strode away with me. Once we had gone some distance from the main hall, he laughed softly. Your acting is quite good, still far inferior to your Highness's. Meanwhile, Song Zhang traveled day and night for 7 days before reaching Ganzhou. The local prefect had been living in constant fear and had long awaited Song Zhang's arrival. The dam in Yanshui County had broken a month earlier, flooding countless homes and fertile fields downstream. The authorities had tried desperately to block the breach with mud and sand, but with little effect. The people of the county were furious and had gathered to surround the government office. Ordinarily, the disaster should have been reported to the court as soon as it occurred. The problem was that an enormous sum had been spent repairing that very dam in the 3rd month of the previous year. The court had allocated the silver, but Prefect Li had embezzled part of it, in order to curry favor with powerful nobles. With the funds reduced, inferior materials had been used. He had hoped the structure would last at least 2 or 3 years. Instead, it collapsed after only 1. If Yanshui County alone had suffered, Prefect Li might still have concealed the truth. But several days earlier, during the height of the flood season, torrential rain had caused the temporary repairs to fail again. The floodwaters surged like a beast released from a cage, swallowing several downstream counties. Hundreds of people died within a short time. Prefect Li could no longer hide the catastrophe and hurriedly submitted an evasive memorial to him. Song Zhang's arrival was nothing short of a godsend. After all, the powerful household he had bribed with the embezzled funds was the Xuanyang Marquis residence. Prefect Li explained the disaster from beginning to end. The more he spoke, the more guilty he became. Song Zhang, however, remained strangely calm. At that moment, he was not thinking about flood control at all. He was calculating whether success would earn him enough merit to request a special imperial favor, one that would give him what he wanted while pushing Wendong into an abyss. A dark gleam passed through his eyes. When he first met Wendong, he had thought her stubborn and difficult to tame. Her eyes held the fearlessness and resilience of someone who had not yet been worn down by the world. That quality awakened a quiet desire in him to destroy it. He wanted to see her submit. He wanted to see her afraid. He wanted to crush her pride and watch her fall into despair. That was why he had gladly accepted the engagement, even though their families were poorly matched. Over the years, he had deliberately favored Shen Zuoyan. partly because he genuinely valued her, and partly because he wanted to wear away Windong's sharp edges. If Windong would only bow her head and learn gentleness, he would treat her as well as he treated Shin Zuoyin, yet she never understood her position. For 3 years she had refused to yield before him, and in his eyes she had made no progress at all. She still amused him somewhat, but he had grown tired of her. At the flower-viewing banquet, he had pushed her into the blade, not only to protect Shin Zuoyin. Somewhere in his heart, he had also wanted Windong dead. At least, before she died, he wanted to see despair on her face. Unfortunately, in that instant she had looked more shocked than broken. It was fortunate that she survived, otherwise he would never have seen her rigid and helpless in the Wen residence, crushed by reality and class. Learn to be obedient, Wendong. He had truly wanted to say those words to her himself. Her expression that day had pleased him, but it had not been perfect. She was not shattered enough. She had not collapsed enough. Perhaps she did not love him deeply enough. At the thought, a nameless irritation stirred in Song Zhang's chest. Prefect Li had been waiting anxiously to criticize him. Seeing Song Zhang frown, he assumed there was a problem with the flood control plan. After a long silence, he finally asked cautiously, "How much relief silver has the court allocated this time?" Song Zhang recited the amount. "What? That is not even half of what was spent repairing the dam last year," Prefect cried as though struck by lightning. "I concealed 30% of the casualties, but I did not exaggerate the severity of the disaster." Why would His Majesty? He stopped when he met Song Zhang's cold gaze. After a long oppressive silence, Prefect Li forced a smile. "The city has exhausted its supply of sandbags. The flood is fierce, and ordinary soil is too loose and will wash away. We would have to buy dense, sticky clay at several times the normal price. This relief fund is only a drop in the ocean. It cannot possibly close the breach." "Who says it cannot?" Song Zhang looked at him coldly. "There are still people, are there not?" It was the height of summer, yet a chill traveled from the soles of Prefect's feet to the top of his head. His lips moved, but he felt that anything he said would be wrong. Then Song Zhang laughed softly. "There is no need to panic, Prefect. I was only joking." His expression returned to normal, and he spoke seriously. "If the relief silver is insufficient, we must naturally find another source. Lizhou is not far from here. Temporarily borrowing grain and silver from the Lizhou prefectural treasury should not be difficult." Prefect Li looked troubled. "I considered that. But last month, the court sent an assistant director from the Ministry of Revenue to inspect Lizhou's accounts. Transferring grain and silver out while the audit is underway may be improper." "It does not matter." Song Zhang waved a hand confidently. "That assistant director is my future father-in-law. He may be rigid and stubborn, but even if he has no regard for me, he cannot ignore the ties between our families. For the sake of tens of thousands of disaster victims in Guangzhou, he will not interfere. Borrow what you need without concern." Before leaving, Song Zhang added, "Remember, it must be done quickly. I spent an entire month recovering in a detached residence belonging to Prince Chong'an, yet I saw Xiao Huang only a handful of times. On the day I left the Wen residence, I had planned to ask him immediately why he had helped me, and why he had claimed it was father's wish. But after the carriage arrived, Xiao Huang placed me in a quiet courtyard and disappeared. A guard said, "His Highness has probably gone somewhere to enjoy himself again." Given his reputation, the explanation seemed perfectly natural. Life in the prince's residence was calm. Under the physician's care, my body gradually recovered. At first, I assumed the famous Dr. Xiao Huang mentioned had been merely an excuse to deceive Madame Lo. To my surprise, he truly invited a distinguished physician to treat me. Could he really have believed Song Zhang's story that I had sacrificed myself to save him? One night, moonlight flowed like water across the courtyard. I walked alone, my thoughts tangled, when a maid passing the gate stopped and beckoned to me with a smile. "Miss Wins, His Highness has returned. He is in the study now. If you need to see him, go quickly. Once morning comes, he may disappear again." After thanking her repeatedly, I hurried to the study. The courtyard was brightly lit. Xiao Huang's tall silhouette showed clearly against the window. For some reason, I suddenly felt hesitant. After lingering outside for a moment, I finally asked a guard to announce me and entered. My steps were light. Before I could offer a greeting, my gaze fell on Xiao Huang, who sat behind a shelf displaying antiques, his chin resting on one hand, apparently asleep. There were no attendants in the room, and the outer courtyard was silent. Not long earlier, he had survived an assassination attempt. His residence should have been tightly guarded, yet the guards had allowed me to enter with ease. And he himself seemed completely defenseless. Something felt strange. I could neither stay comfortably nor leave without explanation. After a moment's hesitation, I gathered my courage and called softly, "Your Highness." Only his slow, even breathing answered. Now that I stood closer, candlelight danced across his exceptionally handsome face. Fatigue showed clearly between his brows, lending an almost solemn dignity to features that usually held a roguish allure. I found myself wondering whether this man had truly been indulging in pleasure. Xiao Huang slept deeply. Even the most thoughtless person would have known not to disturb him. I turned to leave quietly and planned to return another day. Then a mosquito buzzed into the room and landed directly on the bridge of his nose. As a child, I had once been bitten on the eyelid by one of those vicious mosquitoes. When I woke the next morning, the swelling had been so painful and itchy that I suspected the creature was a hornet in disguise. Xiao Huang was an imperial prince. If he appeared in public the next day with a red, swollen nose, the sight would be impossible to imagine. I raised my hand to swat the insect, then froze. If my palm truly struck Prince Chong'an's face, the mosquito would not be the one to die. If you do not strike soon, I will have to chase it away myself. Just as I stood trapped in indecision, a lazy voice filled with amusement sounded. At some point, Xiao Huang had opened his eyes. His long, narrow eyes regarded me helplessly. I hurriedly bowed. "I was careless and disturbed your highness's rest. Please forgive me. Rise. Is there any greater offense than standing by and watching that wicked creature drink my blood?" With a sharp smack, Xiao Huang slapped the bridge of his own nose. He wiped his hand with a handkerchief, looking rather pleased with himself. Then he looked at me for a moment and sighed. "Li Daoming truly deserves his reputation. It has only been a month, yet your complexion is completely different. You even look a little fuller in the face. Physician Li's skill is extraordinary. He diagnosed my condition at a glance. Thanks to your highness's favor, I was able to recover here without fear. My health has now fully returned. For such great kindness, I truly do not know how to repay you." Xiao Huang raised a hand to stop my formal thanks. "Spare me the empty courtesies. You have been looking for me everywhere these past few days." "What do you want?" Understanding suddenly appeared in his eyes. "First, let me make one thing clear. I know you did not take that knife for me, so do not expect a reward for saving my life. I had already suspected as much and was not surprised. If your highness knows the truth, why did you still use it as an excuse to rescue me? And why did you say it was my father's wish? Did father truly ask for your help? He was in Lizhou. How could he have known my situation?" Xiao Huang picked up the jade pot on the table and poured 2 cups of tea. He pushed one toward me. "The flower viewing banquet was chaotic, but my eyesight is still good. I happened to see second young Master Song push you into the blade with his own hands. When Lord Wen traveled to Lizhou on imperial orders, I was there as well out of respect for your father." I casually told him what happened. My heart tightened. "What did father say? What did he say?" Xiao Huang's lips curved as he remembered the scene. "He cursed." He described it vividly. The normally refined Lord Wen had berated Song Zhang for roughly 5 hours, mixing local expressions no one understood with every coarse insult known in the marketplace. At the memory of Wen nearly losing his mind, Xiao Huang could barely suppress his laughter. I was surprised, yet I could imagine father behaving exactly that way. But more than his fury towards Song Zhang, Lord Wen was worried about you. Xiao Huang continued, his expression becoming serious. He said his eldest daughter appears upright and calm, but is actually strong-willed and very determined. You often act beyond anyone's expectations. He feared that once you woke, you would throw caution aside and go after Song Zhang without regard for your own safety, or do something irreversible in a moment of anger. My throat tightened. My fingers clenched unconsciously. Perhaps father also did not want to offend the Marquis household. He feared that when you discovered there was no hope of ending the engagement, you might harm yourself in despair. Xiao Huang interrupted sternly. And the truth nearly proved him right. After Song Zhang came to see you, did you not nearly refuse food altogether? I stared at him in shock. That is not what happened. I merely had no appetite. Madame Luo was the one who... You truly never had even the faintest such thought? His penetrating gaze and unquestionable tone caught every defense in my throat, unable to answer. I lowered my eyes guiltily. His expression softened. When he spoke again, his voice was much gentler. I understand that you would rather die than marry Song Zhang. Lord Wen understands it even more clearly. The difficulty is that the marriage was granted by an imperial princess. That is why Lord Wen willingly humbled himself and agreed to work for a prince he had once denounced in a memorial to the throne. In exchange, he asked me to protect you and help you escape your predicament. Xiao Huang took a sip of warm tea and seemed faintly moved. For such a rigid and old-fashioned man to lower his head before me, he must value you greatly. I pressed my lips together, fighting the burning sensation in my nose. I was afraid tears would fall the moment I spoke. Xiao Huang remained silent until I regained control. Then he said, "As for your engagement to the Xuanyang Marquis household, even if I plead for you before the emperor, Aunt Chang'e must ultimately agree. Unfortunately, my relationship with her has never been very harmonious. Her health is poor, and her temper has become even worse." He set down his cup. "All I can do is arrange for you to meet her once. Whether you can persuade her to change her mind will depend on you." A teasing smile curved his lips. "Do not disappoint me," Knight gradually settled. After exchanging a few more words, Wendong bowed and withdrew. Xiao Huang stood beside the window until her slender figure disappeared around the corridor. Only then did he turn, open a wooden box, and take out a secret letter. The message had come from Li Zhou. It contained detailed evidence that local officials had falsely reported natural disasters for years and openly embezzled relief funds. Xiao Huang's knuckles tightened around the paper. For years he had appeared to withdraw from government, spending his days in extravagant pleasure. In truth, he had been secretly investigating corruption throughout the court. The notion of a decadent prince secretly serving as the emperor's investigator might have sounded like a tired old tale, yet that role had allowed Xiao Huang to root out many corrupt officials. The assassin at the flower viewing banquet had come from Li Zhou. He had hidden inside the prince's residence for years, waiting for a chance to kill the man he believed to be the greatest corrupt official in the realm, and avenge relatives who had died in an epidemic long ago. Following that clue, Xiao Huang discovered that the prefect of Li Zhou had not only embezzled money habitually, but was also deeply connected to powerful officials in the capital. Pretending to travel through Li Zhou for pleasure, Xiao Huang attended feast after feast and quietly extracted information. He eventually learned that the epidemic years earlier had been deliberately caused. The person behind it had been Songlan, the late heir of the Xuanyang Marquis household, who had died of illness nearly a year ago. Songlan had conspired with the prefect to transport the bodies of plague-stricken tribesmen from the frontier into Li Zhou, triggering a devastating outbreak. They then sealed the news, trapped the sick Sixer inside an isolated city, and left them to survive or perish without aid. Afterward, they inflated the number of victims to obtain an enormous relief allocation from the court and pocketed the silver. Unfortunately, Songlan had acted with extraordinary caution and left not a single document that could serve as proof. After his death, everyone connected to the matter either disappeared or died suddenly. Xiao Huang did not believe for a moment that the Marquis of Xuanyang had played no part in silencing them. His gaze darkened. He carefully put away the secret letter. At that moment, rapid footsteps sounded in the corridor. His personal guard Zhou Yang pushed the door open without ceremony, then could not resist glancing back outside. Strange, Miss Wen looked miserable when she entered, but she left with her brows completely relaxed. "Your Highness, what miraculous medicine did you use to make her happy?" Annoyed by the guard's lack of respect, Xiao Huang deliberately darkened his expression. "Zhou Yang, you have become very bold. You dared let someone enter while I was asleep. If anything had happened, you would be the first person His Majesty punished." "But it was Miss Wen," Zhou Yang said with a careless shrug. "What could she possibly do to you? She has wanted to see you for so many days. Now that you've finally returned, how could I bear to stop her? Besides, when you left the residence, were you not constantly asking about her condition?" The words came like firecrackers, accompanied by a knowing look. A vein throbbed on Xiao Huang's forehead. When he first reached an agreement with Wen Tao, Xiao Huang still needed to remain in Li Zhou to ensure Wendong's safety. He ordered Zhou Yang to watch the Wen residence discreetly and send regular reports. Xiao Huang had only wanted confirmation that she was safe and had not done anything reckless. Instead, Zhou Yang wrote like an infatuated admirer, recording every movement, frown and smile in painstaking detail. Miss Wen woke today. Her brows tightened slightly when she opened her eyes, probably because the wound still hurt. Miss Wen quarreled with second young Master Song and threw away all the tokens they had exchanged. Miss Wen argued with her stepmother. After answering back, her meals were reduced. At first, Xiao Huang had no interest in such trivial matters and forced himself to read them. Over time, however, those ordinary details acquired a peculiar charm. Without realizing it, he began wondering whether she had eaten properly that day and whether she had finally found some peace. After returning to the capital, he strongly recommended Zhang as the official responsible for flood control. If the only concern had been the people of Ganzhou, honest officials from the Ministry of Works, or men like Wen'o, would have been far better choices. Had the emperor chosen alone, he would almost certainly have selected such a loyal minister. But the disaster in Ganzhou had already spread like water through a broken dike in Xiaohuang's view. Very little could still be saved. To many nobles, ordinary lives were no more valuable than mayflies or ants. Xiaohuang had never agreed with contempt for human life. Yet on the road to removing corrupt ministers, some sacrifices seemed unavoidable. The emperor governed with benevolence, but even he found it difficult to reverse the dynasty's decay. Xiaohuang believed that making the cruel decisions his younger brother could not make was the reason he existed. Therefore, he recommended Zhang, determined to use the flood disaster to obtain decisive precedence against the Shuaneng Marquis household. He had instructed Wenda that if Ganzhou came to borrow grain or silver, he must not stop them. So long as the other party signed a written loan agreement, Xiaohuang would have the opening he needed to investigate the Marquis household thoroughly. Success or failure depended entirely on Wendao's ability to persuade them to put the loan in writing. Before parting, Xiaohuang had deliberately teased the stubborn old official. If this fails and Zhang returns in triumph to marry your daughter, the Wen and Song families will be bound together by marriage. When the case is exposed, the Wen family will fall with them and never recover. Lord Wen must exercise the utmost care. The warning sent a chill down Wendao's spine. After a long silence, he said, "Your Highness promised to help my daughter end her engagement." "Yes," Xiaohuang smiled cunningly, "but that also depends on whether Miss Wendong is willing to do her part. If both father and daughter fail, even I will be powerless." Several days later, Xiaohuang kept his promise. When he entered the palace for an audience, he brought Wendong with him. Outside Changle Palace, he repeatedly warned her, "My aunt is proud. Illness has made her temper fiercer than fire. No matter what she says, you must be cautious in word and action. Under no circumstances should you," he paused, "throw anything at her." Wendong stared at him, then gave him a rare resentful look. "Your Highness may rest assured, I still intend to live to 100. Xiaohuang laughed. He watched as she followed the guiding eunuch into the depths of the palace, then turned toward Chong'an Hall. He intended to report his recent findings to the emperor and speak privately with his younger brother. About 4 hours passed. When Xiaohuang left Chong'an Hall, he planned to visit Changle Palace and ask how Wendong's audience had gone. Near Xuanqing Gate, however, he saw a familiar figure standing alone. Wendong had probably just left the Grand Princess's residence. Her expression was heavy, and she stood completely still. Xiaohuang watched from a distance. A powerful sense of foreboding suddenly rose in him. Almost instinctively, he quickened his pace and hurried toward her with an anxiety he did not recognize in himself. "What happened?" Before Wendong answered, he had already imagined the Grand Princess raging at her, or tearing into her with cruel words. Her lashes trembled. She slowly looked up, confusion and something almost absurd filling her eyes. "Her Highness said she forgot. Before meeting the Grand Princess, I had considered every possible outcome. In the end, there should have been only 2 answers, yes or no. I had never imagined a third. I forgot." Her cold voice had drifted down from the raised dais in one brief careless answer. Grand Princess Changle reclined against a flower-carved chair. There had been no uncertainty on her face and no desire to ask questions in that instant. I understood, she had not truly forgotten. It was the arrogance of someone who stood above everyone else. The engagement had determined half my life to her. It had been no more than an idle sentence spoken on a whim. She was too lazy to amend it and even less willing to accept responsibility. She claimed to have forgotten, but the world remembered. Those trapped inside the arrangement remembered most of all. That night, cold moonlight lay over the pond in Prince Chong'an's residence. I stared blankly at the water when slow footsteps sounded behind me. Xiaohuang's voice followed. "That is how class works. Those above may act on every whim, while those below can do nothing against them." A faint sorrow and self-mockery hid in his tone. He laughed softly. "Are you disappointed in this world?" I slowly shook my head. It was unexpected, but I had considered the possibility of such an outcome. Looking down at the pond, I sighed from the depths of my heart. I only feel that power is truly intoxicating. The Grand Princess is like that. Zhang is the same. With nothing more than their own wishes, they can play with me in the palms of their hands. I am angry, resentful, and unwilling to accept it, yet I cannot help being drawn toward that same power. I gave a helpless laugh. At this point, what can I say except that it must be wonderful to possess power? The night wind moved through the trees, leaving only the rustle of leaves. Xiao Huang was silent for a long time. When I looked up, I found him staring at me in astonishment. "Your Highness," at my soft call, he seemed to wake from a dream. A trace of discomfort crossed his face. After another silence, he smiled. "Wendong, do not compromise. I look forward to seeing what you will do." The next day, I visited Minghua. After a few polite words, I told her everything Song Zhang had done. I never imagined he concealed such a vicious heart. Minghua's delicate brows drew together. "Donger, how do you want me to help? I would not dare trouble your highness with a major matter, but I remembered the polo match 3 years ago. The Grand Princess arranged our engagement because Song Zhang and I reminded her of herself and her late prince consort. I wondered whether, if she understood that Song Zhang is nothing like him, she might change her mind. Minghua had once been raised beside the Grand Princess, so she should have known something about the prince consort who died young. To my surprise, Minghua gave a strange smile. "Donger, you are mistaken. It was not Song Zhang who resembled the prince consort, it was you." I froze, she explained slowly. "Their marriage also began with a polo match. On the field, the prince consort was exactly like you. He refused to yield even half a step and fought with all his strength. After he defeated her, my aunt turned around and asked the late emperor to grant their marriage." She sighed. "As you know, the laws of our dynasty forbid a princess's consort from holding office. He was a man filled with ambition, yet he was ultimately confined within the princess's residence, his aspirations reduced to nothing. My aunt admired that he would rather break than bend, but she was always determined to make him bow. The prince consort was intelligent. Before long, the two became deeply devoted to each other." Silence filled the room. When I did not answer, Minghua said gently, "Donger, sometimes bowing your head is precisely how you avoid having to bow forever." I considered her words. In the end, I merely smiled bitterly and changed the subject to ordinary news from the capital. When we parted, Minghua spoke softly. "If you truly escape this predicament, it may be a blessing. A few days ago, I heard that the Xuanyang Marquis household summoned an imperial physician again. There is a 9 in 10 chance that Shen Zhouyan is carrying a boy. If that is true, even if you marry into the household, you can no longer become the wife of the heir. Under the laws of our dynasty, if the designated heir died, his legitimate eldest son would inherit. Only if he had no legitimate son would the title pass to his brother. Shen Zhouyan had always claimed publicly that she carried a daughter. Now it appeared Song Zhang's dream of becoming heir might soon vanish. Afterward, I begged Xiao Huang to arrange another audience with the Grand Princess. The palace doors remained tightly shut. I could only kneel outside and request admittance. Perhaps 4 hours passed, perhaps longer. At last the heavy doors opened. The moment I saw the figure above the hall, I bowed to the floor. 3 years ago, Your Highness decreed my engagement to Song Zhang, the second young master of the Xuanyang Marquis household. Yet this man is vicious and treacherous. He used me to block a blade, deliberately attempting to take my life, and afterward showed no remorse. I beg Your Highness to show mercy and permit me to end this engagement." Grand Princess Chang'an looked exhausted, and was clearly displeased that I had disturbed her peace. "Young lady of the Wen family, I thought you knew how to read the room. Do you not understand that this marriage was a favor granted to both households? I beg Your Highness to judge fairly. If the favor was granted to both Song Zhang and me, then, by treating the life of the woman chosen for him as worthless, has he not insulted Your Highness's authority? For me to reject a man who disregards imperial favor is surely reasonable." A sharp tongue. The Grand Princess covered her mouth with a handkerchief and coughed several times. "Even if I let you end the engagement, then what? The Xuanyang Marquis household is at the height of its power. You are merely the daughter of a minor official. If you offend them, do you expect to keep your life? While Song Zhang still feels something for you, why not become gentler and more accommodating? You may still live peacefully in the future." I bit my lip. "Did Your Highness once advise the prince consort in the same way?" The air in the great hall froze. The deathly silence felt like a blade suspended overhead, making it difficult to breathe. The truth was that I was terrified. My knees trembled and cold sweat soaked my back, but I had no path of retreat. I drew a deep breath and continued. "Perhaps in Your Highness's eyes those beneath you should naturally kneel at your feet. So when you encountered a stubborn man who refused to bow, you treated him like a treasure and held him in your palm. What you wanted was not his sincere love. You wanted to break his pride with your own hands and force him to submit. To Your Highness, that was not a marriage. It was a game in which another person's entire life became the stake. Insolent. Grand Princess Chang'an's expression changed instantly, yet strangely, she did not call anyone to drag me away. Zhang wanted my life because he regarded me as a toy. Then when your highness broke the prince consort's spirit, what did you regard him as? I gathered every fragment of courage and looked directly into her furious eyes. He died young, consumed by grief. Before his death, he did not leave your highness even a single word. Through all these years, have you truly never regretted it? The hall became so quiet that a falling needle could have been heard. After an unknown length of time, a short cold laugh came from above. Zhang, you truly are audacious beyond measure. You dare use such words to stab directly into my heart. She spoke through clenched teeth but then sighed. That stubbornness does resemble Yuan. The Grand Princess seemed almost relieved to have finally found someone willing to hear the past. When I lost to Zhang in that polo match, I was furious. I begged my father to appoint him as my consort. It was not because I loved him deeply. I only wanted to see him forced to bow before me. Even after we married, whenever we argued, he would never admit fault unless it truly belonged to him. It is laughable. I used every method I could think of. Yet he still refused to yield. At last I threatened the lives of his family, only then did he bow his head. The Grand Princess gazed into the distance, regret filling her eyes. You ask whether I regret it, of course I do. I regret it beyond measure. Her voice suddenly sharpened with raw pain. It was all because of my foolish pride. I believed that if he admitted defeat, I had won. Afterward, he granted my every wish and obeyed me in everything. I thought he had finally come to love me as I loved him. Only when he lay dying did I understand. His final request was still that I spare his family. For all those years beside me, he had lived as though walking on thin ice. I finally understood how hopeless he must have felt, even at the end. She slowly descended the jade steps and turned her back to me. 3 years ago, when I saw you and Zhang, it was like seeing Yuan and myself in our youth. I hoped you might reach the ending we never did. Unfortunately, you have followed the same road. At her signal, a palace maid came to help me stand. The eyes that had once held nothing but authority were now wet with tears. When she looked at me, I saw memory, sorrow, and a trace of self-mockery. Zhang may be another version of me, but you are not Yuan. I will ask the emperor to issue an edict withdrawing the engagement between you and the Xuanyang Marquis household. As for whatever follows, you must rely upon your own fortune. Her tone was decisive. She turned to leave. Your Highness, I called after her. Someone once told me that bowing temporarily before reality may be the way to preserve a conviction that will never truly submit. My voice trembled, but every word was clear. I do not believe the prince consort lived only in despair. Perhaps he was always waiting for your highness to understand his heart. Minghua once said that the love in his eyes whenever he looked at you could not have been false. Beneath the appearance of submission, there may have remained a profound hope that one day you would truly awaken and stand beside him as an equal, rather than forever looking down from above. The Grand Princess stopped. Her back stiffened for an instant, but she did not turn. Then she slowly disappeared behind the inner hall. Several days later, at Prince Chong'an's residence, I received the imperial edict. From that day onward, the engagement between the Song and Wen families was formally dissolved. Their future marriages would have nothing to do with each other, and no connection would remain between them. After more than 2 months of flood control, Zhang finally returned to the capital, before Shen Zhouyin went into labor. Despite many setbacks, the flood control work ultimately ended without serious mishap. At first, he had expected to argue at length with his future father-in-law, the Ministry of Revenue official stationed in Lizhou. To his surprise, Wen Tao merely required him to sign a written loan agreement before releasing the silver without further objection. Zhang had not wanted to sign it once. Certain matters left a written trace. They could eventually become a hidden danger. But he was desperate to return to the capital and exchange his flood control achievement for an imperial favor. Moreover, the prefect of Lizhou had once been a colleague of his deceased elder brother, and Wen Tao was connected to the Song household through the engagement. It was only one document. Zhang decided it could not matter. On the day he departed Ganzhou, the people of Ganzhou knelt along both sides of the road and bowed in thanks. Just as he was about to enter his carriage, a clod of mud flew through the air and struck his official hat squarely. Corrupt official! A child's voice rang out from the crowd. Zhang looked toward the sound and saw a thin woman hurriedly cover the child's mouth. He gave a faint, cold snort, but maintained his composure and calmly saluted the officials who had come to see him off. The same day he reached the capital, Travel-worn and exhausted, Song Zhang returned to the marquis residence. He barely rested before changing into court robes and entering the palace in Chong'an Hall. The young emperor carefully read his report. After hearing his account of the disaster, His Majesty smiled. Minister Song is exceptionally capable. In only 2 months, you brought the floods in Guangzhou under control and helped restore the people's livelihoods. Your service is considerable. Tell me, what reward do you desire? Emotion surged in Song Zhang's heart, but he pretended to hesitate. After several ceremonial refusals, he finally said, "Since my elder brother died, my sister-in-law has spent every day in grief. His mourning period is nearly over. She is still young, yet she has no intention of remarrying." He paused and quietly studied the emperor's expression. Her only concern is that the child in her womb will grow up without a father. Therefore, I humbly ask permission to follow an ancient precedent, marry my sister-in-law, and raise my nephew as my own, thereby preserving family duty and proper order. Silence filled the hall. Song Zhang's heart tightened, and he hurriedly added, "Of course, my sister-in-law would hold only the position of a secondary wife of equal rank. I have no intention of ending my engagement to the Wen family." A secondary wife of equal rank? The emperor spoke so softly that it was almost a murmur, yet Song Zhang somehow heard mockery in the words. Before he could think further, His Majesty smiled brightly. "Minister Song is so benevolent and righteous, how could I refuse?" He dipped his brush in ink and immediately wrote an imperial decree. The chief eunuch bowed and presented the brilliant yellow scroll to Song Zhang. Suppressing his delight, he knelt and thanked the emperor before reading it carefully. Then his gaze reached the words, granting Shen Juoyan the position of Song Zhang's principal wife. His entire body froze. For an instant, the blood in his veins seemed to stop. Seeing his confusion, the emperor explained with a smile. "Minister Song's conduct is the height of righteousness. How could I allow people to criticize you for violating proper rights by taking a secondary wife of equal rank? Besides, Miss Wen requested the end of your engagement long ago. I have already betrothed her to my unreliable imperial elder brother. She will never trouble you again. Since you have always cherished Madame Shen so deeply, now that I have issued this decree, you may openly and honorably spend the rest of your lives together as husband and wife." Song Zhang did not know how he left the palace or returned to the marquis residence. In a daze, he rushed straight to the Wen residence, only to find its gates tightly closed. The gatekeeper trembled as he said, "The eldest young lady was invited to recover at Prince Chong'an's residence 2 months ago. His Highness remembered that she saved his life and specifically asked her to remain there longer." Song Zhang felt as though lightning had struck him. In the end, he had brought this disaster upon himself. Wendong could not have ended the engagement so smoothly without Prince Chong'an's power. The emperor's words, already betrothed, ignited a bitter fire in his chest. What did the emperor mean by betrothed? Had Wendong been granted to Xiaowang as a secondary consort, or sent into the prince's residence as a concubine? She had belonged in his palm. She had been his toy. What right did another man have to take her so easily? Jealousy and unwillingness burned away his reason. Ignoring all dignity, Song Zhang pounded on the Wen residence gates and declared that he would not stop until he saw one of the gatekeeper nearly cried. "The master has not returned to the capital. Madam has gone back to her maternal family. Second young master, even if you break down the gate, there is no one here for you to see." Song Zhang went still. Winta's inspection of the accounts should have ended long ago. Why had he not returned? Song Zhang abruptly turned and raced back to the marquis residence. He went directly to Shen Zhouyan's courtyard. Her maid became wary the moment she saw him, unable to understand why he looked so furious. Before she could announce him, he pushed her aside and entered the bedroom. Shen Zhouyan sat near the bed, sewing tiny clothes for the unborn child. The door burst open with a loud crash, startled. Her hand shook and the silver needle pricked her fingertip. Before she could feel the pain, she looked up and recognized him. Her face turned white. Instinctively, she tried to retreat, but her heavily pregnant body made it difficult for her to move. "Song Zhang, about the child, Ayan, do not be afraid. I did not come to accuse you." Looking at her bloodless face, Song Zhang forced down the violence surging inside him and produced a distorted imitation of tenderness. "Song Zhang, I was wrong," Shen Zhuoyan sobbed. "That physician deceived me, so I believed the child was a girl. I truly did not mean to lie to you." After Song Lan died, Shen Zhuoyan discovered she was carrying his child for the marquis household. It should have been wonderful news. But she soon realized that Song Zhang, her younger brother-in-law and the childhood companion, who had always treated her kindly, seemed to regard the child as an obstacle. From then on, she never slept peacefully. To calm him, she paid a wandering medium a large sum to insist that the child was female. Song Zhang said nothing when he heard, but the tension between his brows visibly eased. Shen Juyan had intended to hide the truth until the birth. Yet after she was frightened at the flower viewing banquet, an imperial physician examined her. Hoping to please the Marquis of Xuanyang, he confidently declared that the child was a healthy boy. Song Zhang had been silent afterward, but he remained at home and personally watched over her recovery. Even the incident at the crowded fair, where she had nearly miscarried, had been arranged by him. Now he approached one step at a time, his voice so gentle that it made her skin crawl. "It is all right, Yin," I asked the emperor for a decree. "I will marry you as a secondary wife of equal rank, and this child will become my own flesh and blood." Shen Zhouyan's face turned ashen, but Song Zhang continued. "Unfortunately, there was a small mistake. Donger ended the engagement, so you are now my principal wife. Do not cry, be happy. I wanted to marry you from childhood, but my elder brother took you first. After all these turns, you are still going to become my wife." Then Song Zhang stopped, and his voice suddenly chilled. "But why did you disobey me?" He lunged forward and seized her by the throat. "I clearly told you to summon Windong to the Marquis residence every day and keep her under watch." The maid screamed and scrambled out to call for help. Shen Zhouyan struggled to loosen his fingers and forced out the words, "Miss Wen was recovering at the prince's residence. How could I summon her?" Only when her face had darkened from lack of air did Song Zhang finally release her. The Marquis of Xuanyang rushed in after hearing the commotion. At the sight before him he roared, "Unfilial wretch! How dare you treat your pregnant elder sister-in-law this way? You are worse than a beast." Song Zhang acted as though he had heard nothing. He threw the imperial decree at his father. "From today onward, Yin is my wife." Then he turned and left without looking back. I remained at Prince Chong'an's residence for nearly 3 months. At the end of that month, father finally returned to the capital, worn by travel. That night, dressed in plain dark robes, he entered the prince's residence in secret. A haggard middle-aged man followed him. Father introduced him as an assistant prefect from Lizhou. He personally overheard the prefect and Songlan planning together. He is now willing to testify against the Xuanyang Marquis household. Only then did I understand the true weight of the favor Xiaohuang had mentioned. Xiaohuang lavished praise on father. "Excellent, Lord Wen. Together with the decisive evidence you and I have collected, we can dispense with a preliminary search and send them directly to the Court of Judicial Review for interrogation." Father's brows remained tightly drawn, his anger undiminished. Such parasites make one's blood boil. Do they not understand that the people are the foundation of the state, and only when the foundation is secure can the realm be at peace? Xiaohuang smiled bitterly. Pain filled his eyes as well. At that moment, any words of comfort would have sounded empty. That night, armed officers, fierce as wolves, surrounded the Xuanyang Marquis residence. The household that had once stood at the height of glory became a prison in an instant. The Marquis of Xuanyang and his associates were dragged into prison carts. Yet after searching everywhere, the officers could not find the second young master, who had once been only one step from becoming heir. Several days later, I heard that the Marquis of Xuanyang had received especially harsh treatment from one of the prison guards. The guard came from Lizhou. After learning that the epidemic years earlier had been caused by the Marquis's eldest son, he showed no mercy. The officers also found countless secret letters in a deep underground chamber, records of collusion with local officials, detailed account books, and mountains of illicit gold and silver. Shen Juyan was so terrified by the confiscation of the household that she miscarried that night. The Shen family petitioned for leniency on account of her condition. In the end, she was spared from being sold into servitude and returned to her maternal home to recover. As for Song Zhang, he seemed to vanish from the world. But he could not have left the capital, I believed. I knew where he would go. Under a bleak moon, Song Zhang staggered through a deep alley. He wore filthy, coarse clothes, and bloodstains marked his body. For several days, he had hidden in the home of a blind old woman. A few sweet lies had persuaded her to shelter him from the search. Then, several days earlier, she suddenly asked whether he was the young lord from the Marquis household wanted throughout the city. He had no choice, he could not die, at least not there. On the night the Marquis residence was seized, he had been drinking away his frustration over Wendong in a tavern. When he heard the news, he raced home in a frenzy, only to see the last of his family being loaded into prison carts. He had no time to think, he fled like a hunted rat. Later he learned that Wen Tao, assistant director of the Ministry of Revenue, had been promoted to vice minister and richly rewarded for helping expose corrupt officials. Only then did Song Zhang understand that he had fallen into Wen Tao's trap from the beginning. He blamed the Wen father and daughter for every humiliation he now endured. Keeping to the shadows, Song Zhang reached the rear wall of the Wen residence. With a light spring, he vaulted over it. He had visited the household several times and knew the grounds well. Only one thought remained in his mind: revenge. He intended to begin with Wen Tao's young daughter, slipping into the child's room and killing her before leaving her where her father would find her. Then in front of Wen Tao, he planned to kill Madame Luo. Only after Wen Tao had been driven to despair and begged for mercy would Song Zhang kill him as well, and hang his head at the residence gate, so that everyone entering the Wen household would see the warning. As for Wen Dong, he intended to assault and disgrace her, believing that this would drive her into the deepest despair. Even if he were executed afterward, he wanted her to live beneath a stain she could never erase. He was certain Prince Chong'an would refuse her, that every other man would despise her, and that nothing would torment her more than being forced to spend the rest of her life alone because of what he had done. His eyes were bloodshot as he rushed along the deserted path toward the rear courtyard. Strangely, the Wen residence was unnaturally quiet that night. He saw no one along the way, but rage had consumed him, and he gave no thought to the silence. He reached the courtyard, drew his knife and pushed open the door. A tremendous force struck him at once. Several hands pinned him to the ground. Torches flared simultaneously, their light so bright that he could not open his eyes. "I knew you would come here for revenge." Wen Dong's cold voice sounded behind him. Song Zhang struggled to turn his head. Armored officers surrounded the courtyard. "Wen Dong, you vicious, despicable woman!" he roared like a wild animal. "You and your father laid a trap for me. You drove me to this point. It is all your fault." Nothing remained of the noble young lord he had once been. His face twisted with hatred until he looked almost demonic. "Song Zhang, you are reaping what you sowed. If you had not harbored evil intentions and committed such filthy acts, who could have brought you down?" As she spoke, Wen Dong threw a jade pendant onto the ground before him. It was the pendant he had carved with his own hands as proof of his so-called favor. Song Zhang stared at it. His shouting slowly became a cry of despair. He could no longer fight the cold shackles or the fate waiting ahead. He could not accept that someone as privileged as he was had fallen to a woman he once considered a lowly toy. The officers dragged him past her like dead weight. Wen Dong leaned down slightly and looked at his wretched face without emotion. "Song Zhang, what stands in your way now? It is neither conspiracy nor royal power." She gave a cold smile. "It is the law." The case against the Xuanyang Marquis household was not formally concluded until the 3rd month of the following year. It implicated many people. The Marquis of Xuanyang and all his accomplices were sentenced to be executed after autumn. The women of the household were reduced to servitude. Those guilty of lesser crimes were exiled to the bitter frontier, some to labor in mines and others as military slaves. Song Zhang was among those sentenced to exile. Before the convoy departed, he asked to see eldest young lady Wen once. Wen Dong refused. Xiao Huang went to see him instead. "Your Highness concealed your abilities for so many years and no one discovered it," Song Zhang said. By then he was gaunt and exhausted, like a piece of rotting wood. None of his former arrogance remained. Xiao Huang answered indifferently, "I do not possess even 1/10,000th of your elder brother's cunning. His schemes were nearly flawless. Had he not died so early, even I might have struggled to find an opening." The meaning was clear. Song Zhang, who had stepped so easily into the trap, was not worthy of being Xiao Huang's opponent. Song Zhang laughed bitterly and drew a piece of jade from his sleeve. It was the pendant he had once given Wen Dong. After she threw it away, he had picked it up again. During his days in prison, he had rubbed it against the rough stone wall day after day until its sharp edges became smooth and polished. "I no longer have the dignity to face her. Please give this to her as a final remembrance." Xiao Wang accepted it without even looking. With a casual motion, he threw it into the cold lake beside the road. Song Zhang's pupils contracted. He instinctively lunged after it, but the shackles caught his feet, sending him to the ground and leaving his chin bleeding. "Song Zhang, stop pretending," Xiao Wang said contemptuously. "A remembrance? You only want to disgust her one last time." He looked down at the man sprawled before him. "Do you truly believe being spared execution means you have escaped? The road of exile is long and brutal. The Xuanyang Marquis household has made countless enemies. Do you imagine the journey will be peaceful?" The last trace of color vanished from Song Zhang's face. Xiao Huang smiled coldly. Enjoy whatever time remains to you. Only when the prisoner convoy disappeared beyond the city gate did the woman seated in a distant tea house set down her cup. Dong was about to call the waiter for the bill when someone sat leisurely across from her. Waiter, 2 cups of tea and 1 plate of osmanthus cakes. At once, Xiao Huang smiled at Dong, though the words on his lips did not match his thoughts. Since you came all this way, why hide beneath that veiled hat? Are you afraid people will fail to recognize you? Dong gave a soft snort. I only wanted to see my enemies ending with my own eyes. I was afraid that if he saw me, he would imagine I still cared. What if that delusion gave him the strength to keep living? Xiao Wang laughed after Song Zhang was convicted. Dong left the prince's residence. Because Madame Luo had ignored right and wrong and colluded with Song Zhang, Ta was furious. He ordered her to remain at the family's ancestral home and forbade her from returning to the capital. From then on, Dong's life in the Wen residence became remarkably comfortable. At first, Xiao Wang was overwhelmed by the Xuanyang Marquis case and had no attention to spare for anything else. Then one day, a shipment of tribute lychees from Jiangnan arrived at his residence. Instinctively, he ordered the servants to choose the best and send them to Miss Wen. Only after the words left his mouth did he remember that she had long since left his household. Zhou Yang mocked him for half a month because of it. Now Xiao Huang glanced casually at Dong. Beneath the light veil she had shed her former immaturity and become strikingly beautiful. Perhaps because they had not met for so long, she chattered animatedly about small events and her recent worries. But Xiao Huang's thoughts drifted back to the moonlit night beside the pond, when Dong had said that power was truly intoxicating. At that moment, an overwhelming impulse had risen in him. He had wanted to pull her into his arms, set her on the cold stone table, forget everything else and kiss her. The instant the idea appeared, he had wanted to slap himself awake, perverse, utterly shameless. Before that night, he had thought his concern for her resembled that of an elder brother, or even a protective father. Later, he asked why she had spoken so admiringly of power when she had fought so painfully against it. Dong explained that some people used power to exploit others to the bone and bring harm to both the state and its people. Such people deserved the harshest punishment, but others carried the realm on their shoulders, reduced levies and taxes, and rescued commoners from suffering. It is like bowing temporarily in order to preserve the will that never truly bows, she told him. I know your highness pretends to be foolish because you hope that one day the people will no longer have to live beneath such burdens. So she had understood him long ago in the tea house. Dong continued talking. Her father seemed to have been frightened by everything involving Song Zhang, and was now urgently searching for a man willing to marry into the Wen family. Naturally, she refused. Seeing how determined she was, Tao had asked, or does Donger already have someone she loves? At that moment, one face had immediately appeared in her mind, yet the feeling confused her. She loved speaking with Xiao Huang because he always listened seriously, answered gently, and treated her with warmth and equality. Yet what she felt seemed to be more than ordinary fondness. Sometimes, merely thinking of him made her heart ache faintly. Seeing Xiao Huang staring at her in distraction, Dong voiced her confusion. Your Highness has seen so much of the world. Why do you think I feel this way? She looked at him earnestly, waiting for an answer. A spring breeze passed lightly through the tea house. Xiao Huang went still. The road he had chosen had no visible end and was filled with dangers he could not predict. How could he ask the woman he loved to walk such a dangerous road beside him? He took a small sip of tea. A bitter taste lingered on his tongue. Perhaps his old wound had still not healed. Thank you for supporting Panda. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring you more amazing stories. Now, let's begin story 2. On my wedding night, the red candles had already burned more than halfway down, before Lu Yanshu finally pushed open the door and entered. By then, I had removed my bridal robes, bathed, changed into nightclothes, and was seated at the table reviewing the inventory of my dowry. When he saw what I was wearing, he froze for a moment, then immediately frowned. Before he could lose his temper, I pointed to the low couch across from me. Please wait a moment, my lord. His expression stiffened. He snorted coldly and looked down at me with the arrogant smile of a noble-born young master. What exactly does my wife intend to do on our wedding night? Only after I had checked the last 2 pages of the ledger did I incline my head to him and order a maid to bring ink, brush, paper, and inkstone. Seeing Lu Yanshu's confusion, I poured him a cup of tea. My lord, how about we discuss a business arrangement? What arrangement? He looked both wary and bewildered. If you agree to 3 conditions, I will first cover the deficit in the Marquis household's accounts. The late Marquis was addicted to gambling. Not only did he squander more than half the family's property, he even used a considerable portion of the old madame's dowry to cover his losses. The manor still owes the Jinglong gambling house nearly 20,000 taels of silver. If that debt is not paid within 3 months, I fear even this residence will be lost. His whole body jolted. He hurriedly turned his face away, yet still tried to bluff. I have no idea what you are talking about. Tonight is our wedding night. Not only did you remove your veil without waiting for me, but now you are speaking of such things. What are you trying to do? Ignoring his attempt to twist the situation, I smiled faintly. Surely you are not going to claim you married me for myself. If that is truly the case, then I will leave the 20,000 tael debt at the Jinglong gambling house alone. Perhaps because I had exposed his true thoughts, he glared at me. You investigated me? I kept smiling, but did not yield an inch. Can you honestly say you did not marry me for my generous dowry? Lu Yanshu concealed the surprise in his eyes, but his chest heaved with anger. He pointed at me for a long moment without managing to say a word. Did he truly think I did not know why he had chosen me? By marrying the wealthy daughter of a merchant family, he could ensure that his beloved concubine would not be oppressed by a high-born wife, while using my money to restore the reputation of the Jin'an Marquis household. It was meant to accomplish 2 things at once. Unfortunately for him, his household was riddled with holes inside and out. A few casual inquiries had been enough for me to uncover everything. No matter how tight-lipped his personal servant was, a few extra taels of silver could loosen any tongue. Had his family not fallen into such desperate straits, I would never have brought my son into this marriage. I understood perfectly well that commoners could not contend openly with officials, so I did not let him waste any more time. If you agree to my conditions, I continued, then besides covering the household deficit, I can also have concubine Liu's child entered into the clan records as a legitimate son. I will guarantee that I will not interfere in how the 2 of you live together. What do you think? Lu Yanshu's face darkened. After a long silence, he forced out a reply. What are your conditions? I guessed he had remembered the strong maids and servants who had accompanied me here as part of my bridal household. By any measure, they looked far more reliable than the servants of the Jin'an manor. If he had planned to subdue his new principal wife on the wedding day and force me to submit, he had clearly realized that would not be possible. So he had no choice but to compromise. I gave him a gentle, harmless smile. First, my son will be entered into the Liu clan genealogy according to his proper generation and treated as the legitimate eldest son. As for whether he may inherit the title or receive a share of the family property in the future, and how the clan chooses to treat him, that will be entirely up to you. Lu Yanshu showed no obvious displeasure at this. Just then, my trusted nanny entered carrying a sobbing Xiaobao. Young mistress, the young master woke up and would not stop asking for you. I truly could not bear it, so Nanny Chen's eyes were red. The instant Xiaobao saw me, tears welled in his eyes. He stretched both arms toward me and babbled, Mother. He had not seen me all day. He must have missed me terribly. My heart ached and softened at once. I hurriedly took him into my arms and soothed him. At that moment, Lu Yanshu nearly overturned the table as he sprang to his feet. You were married before? You even bore another man's child? While comforting the crying Xiaobao, I no longer had the patience to maintain false courtesy with him. This marriage was always a matter of each of us obtaining what we need. I will not interfere with you and concubine Liu, and you need not interfere with me and my son. You give me a respectable position. I give you money. For you to be so shocked makes it seem as though you have never seen the world. That one sentence threw Lu Yanshu into complete disarray. Shen Qinglan, you have gone too far. Please lower your voice, my lord. Do not frighten my Xiaobao. His chest rose and fell with rage. He pointed at me for a long moment, unable to speak. I calmly continued. Second, within 1 month I will settle the 50,000 taels you owe the Duke of Ying's household, the 30,000 taels owed to the bank, and the 3 months of unpaid wages owed to every servant in this manor. At the end of the previous year, the late Marquis had fallen into a ditch and died. The Jin'an Marquis household had long since drifted away from the center of power. If Lu Yanshu wanted the emperor to remember him and allow him to inherit the title smoothly without spending money to grease the necessary palms, what else could he rely on? The confusion on his face gradually disappeared. The way he looked at me now held anger mixed with wariness. Naturally, I can also manage the household's estates, farms, and shops. I guarantee that within 3 years I can redeem most of the property the late Marquis squandered. What do you think of this arrangement? As for my ability, you may ask around. When I was still young, my father gave me 2 shops merely to keep me occupied. Within 6 months, I had turned those 2 shops into 8. My family's business has prospered year after year, and that success cannot be separated from my efforts. My father often lamented that had I been born a man, no one could say how much I might have accomplished. But I have never believed that being born a woman was my fault. The fault lies with this world, which does not allow women to earn distinction and build careers as men do. If I cannot change the world, then being true to myself will be enough. Lu Yanshu still looked displeased, but I could see that he was weighing my words. While he calculated, I added the final condition. After concubine Liu gives birth, I will personally go to the clan and have the child recorded as legitimate. In our future life together, I promise not to use the authority of the principal wife to oppress her. The 2 of you may live however you wish, but she must also preserve the dignity due to me as mistress of the household. What do you think? Lu Yanshu's face shifted from livid to pale. At last he glanced at Xiaobao, who was dozing in my arms, and lowered his voice in irritation. I have not even agreed yet. Why are you in such a hurry? I smiled with pursed lips and placed the brush in his hand. I am discussing business with you. Since there is no affection between us, let us speak of mutual benefit. You need dignity, I need advantage. You may enjoy a peaceful life with the woman you love. Your child will hold the status of a legitimate son, and the deficit in your household will be filled. You need do nothing except enter my son into the genealogy. You lose nothing in this arrangement. The red candle suddenly crackled, sending up a bright blossom of flame. Lu Yanshu's expression darkened. You planned all of this long ago, did you not? The moment he said that, I knew the matter was settled. How could you call it scheming, my lord? Just as you married me, we are both sincerely entering into a transaction. He laughed coldly. At that moment, the sound of a maid arguing with a young servant came from outside. I told Nanny Chen to carry Xiaobao into the inner room. Soon afterward, a young maid ran in crying, My lord, please come and look at my mistress. Her chest hurts terribly. I fear her old illness has returned. Lu Yanshu immediately sprang up and hurried outside. I did not stop him. I merely called after him. Think it over carefully, my lord. You may give me your answer tomorrow. His steps paused for an instant. Then he snorted and left without looking back. Nanny Chen watched him go with concern. Young mistress, what will we do if the marquis refuses? Do not worry. Tomorrow, have Zhao Si from the Xinglong gambling house pay a visit to the government office where he works. He will agree. I owned a 20% share in the Xinglong gambling house. At the time, I had been urgently searching for a suitable household for Xiaobao, while Lu Yanshu was desperate to find a principal wife who was both wealthy and low-born. I had not yet decided whether to choose him, yet he had already lost patience and sent a matchmaker to propose. He was clearly even more anxious than I had imagined. He would accept my conditions. Nanny Chen still worried that concubine Liu might ruin my plans. That woman is not easy to deal with. Kaiping immediately agreed. Exactly. Before he even married a principal wife, she had already bewitched him into getting her pregnant. Today was his wedding day, yet she openly sent someone to call him away. Who knows how much trouble she will cause in the future? I softened my voice to reassure them. It does not matter. I never intended to live as a true married couple with the marquis. Whatever comes, we will deal with it. There is no need to worry too much. Because Lu Yanshu was the only son of the marquis household and both his parents had died, the ceremony of meeting the relatives involved only a few uncles and aunts from collateral branches. I had prepared gifts for each of them. Some disliked my merchant background, but when they saw the generosity of my presence, every one of them smiled at me. Since they greeted me with smiles, I returned their courtesy and accepted them as relatives with polite grace. After everyone left, Lu Yanshu merely said that he had to report to his government office and departed without looking back. I knew he was deliberately leaving me alone to recover a little of his wounded pride, but I could not be bothered to argue. I simply attended to my own affairs. That evening, just after I had finished dinner and was playing with Xiaobao in my room, Lu Yanshu hurried back. His expression was exceedingly unpleasant. The moment he entered, he snapped at me. I agree to your conditions. Hurry and pay the gambling house debt for me. Only after he had stalked out of the main room in furious uneven steps, did I pick up the contract he had signed and gently blow on the ink to help it dry. Once the writing had fully set, I folded the document carefully and hid it at the very bottom of my jewelry box. Of the 3 conditions I had given him, the most important was that Xiaobao be entered into the Jinan marquis household genealogy. The second concerned the authority to manage the household. Lu Yanshu could give it to me or refuse. The final condition was that he keep his beloved concubine under control so that we could each mind our own affairs. Whoever deliberately caused trouble would bear full responsibility for the consequences. At first he hesitated over whether to hand me control of the manor. Seeing his reluctance, I immediately withdrew the request and said I had no desire to take on such a troublesome responsibility. He promptly turned over the household administration, the accounting office, the command plaques, and all the ledgers to me. That very day, I ordered several of my own experienced accountants to examine the manor's wretched records from recent years. As expected, within half a day they uncovered countless holes. I had every suspicious entry copied down, and by the following evening I summoned everyone in the manor to the front hall. Many people appeared, but a number of long-serving retainers relied on their seniority. Seeing that the Marquis did not seem to favor me, they pretended to be ill and stayed away. I did not indulge them. I directly ordered that every absentee be tied up and brought before me. The hall immediately erupted in commotion. Some were bold enough to assume that a merchant's daughter, without support from her natal family or affection from her husband, could not frighten them. They shouted abuse at me. What are you supposed to be? A low-born merchant wench thinks she is worthy of managing the servants of our Marquis household? You have a few stinking coins and now imagine yourself the mistress? Do you truly think you are the Marchioness of Jinan? I was serving this manor while you were still selling cloth in Zhangnan. Kill me if you dare and see whether the Marquis will protect you. I ordered those who shouted to be bound as well. If they resisted, they were to be beaten first and tied afterward. Soon, even those who should have been on duty but had claimed illness were dragged in under restraint. Once everyone realized that I was serious, no one dared behave recklessly again. I had Quiping take out the account records and compare them against each bound servant. One by one, she read aloud what each person had stolen from the manor, in which year what it had been worth, which household expenses they had embezzled, when they had done so, and how much silver was involved. With every charge she read, everyone except the accused trembled a little more. After the full list of crimes had been announced, I ordered that all the offenders and the evidence be delivered to Shuntian Prefecture for the capital prefect to judge. Most were bondservants who had sold themselves to the manor. Only a few were hired workers. Under the law, once they were sent there, none could emerge unscathed. Those who were not executed might be branded on the face and exiled. In an instant, the front hall filled with people prostrating themselves and trembling as they begged me for mercy. After all, they had seen that Quiping held far more than a single book of evidence. Who knew whose crimes were recorded in the other volumes? How many among them were truly innocent? They knew better than anyone. Their fear was perfectly natural. I set down my teacup and spoke in a calm, mild voice. There is no need to be frightened. I summoned everyone today merely so that we could become acquainted. The Marquis has entrusted this household to me, so naturally I cannot disappoint his expectations. Would you not agree? Everyone immediately echoed me in unison and showered me with praise. I was satisfied with their response. Whether they meant it did not matter. What I needed was the result. The Jinan Marquis' household was rotten and full of holes like a broken sieve. It could not become a tightly run household overnight. First, however, I had to show them what I was capable of. After that, everything would become much easier. Naturally, if I wanted the entire household to obey my every command, those who had already betrayed their masters could not remain for long. Nanny Chen could gradually send them away to the estates. After more than half a month of reform, the household finally began to show some improvement. Everyone had become far more tight-lipped. Affairs inside the manor no longer became known across the capital by noon if they had occurred that morning. Just as I was ready to breathe a little easier, concubine Liu, who had been silent for half a month, suddenly came to my door. Supporting her waist with one hand and deliberately pushing forward a belly that was not yet visibly swollen, she walked slowly into the main hall. Elder sister. Liu Yanran bowed to me, coughed lightly twice, and continued. I am with child, so I should have come to pay my respects much sooner. But the Marquis said I need not concern myself with empty formalities, which is why I came so late. I hope you will not blame me. I placed my ledger down and gestured to a chair. Sit. Perhaps my calmness was not the reaction she had expected. Her expression darkened for a moment before she continued. Elder sister, please do not take what happened on your wedding night to heart. The Marquis had intended to stay with you, but the child in my womb was so restless that I nearly fainted. I had no choice but to send someone to call him. She paused, her eyes turning red. The Marquis cherishes the child, so he— You are a reasonable woman, elder sister. Surely you would not hold such a thing against me, would you? I knew she had come to flaunt her favor, so I had no desire to exchange more words than necessary. Did the Marquis not tell you to avoid disturbing me? She choked. What do you mean by that, elder sister? This is a noble household, not some narrow little merchant home. How could we discard every rule? I ignored the barb about my humble origins and lack of breeding. You came to see me. Was it truly only to pay your respects? Seeing that my expression remained steady, Lu Yanran bit her lip and suppressed her gloating smile. Elder sister truly is an imposing mistress. You had barely entered the household before punishing so many old servants. I only fear that unpleasant rumors will spread, damaging the manor's reputation by making it seem that we mistreat loyal retainers. What shall we do then? People outside are already saying that the new Marchioness of Jinan is cold and heartless. Servants who had worked here for decades were punished or expelled at a word. But were they not guilty? Why should I be afraid? In concubine Lu's opinion, what should I, as mistress of this household, have done instead? I deliberately emphasized the difference between concubine and madam. Lu Yanran's expression darkened at once. She took several deep breaths before barely regaining her composure. Then I was foolish to interfere in elder sister's decisions. Everyone knows you are the beloved only daughter of Master Shen, the man known throughout Zhangnan as the god of wealth, and that no one can surpass you at managing a household or balancing accounts. Oh, but I forgot. Master Shen has already passed away. Now your only support is that little talent for managing households and balancing accounts. She covered her mouth and giggled, one hand supporting her waist while she deliberately pushed out her belly farther. The Marquis has said that this household can belong only to the child in my womb. Elder sister is working so diligently to manage things for my child. It seems I was the one who failed to understand my own good fortune. Please do not blame me. Without waiting for my reply, she turned and walked out. As she departed, the maid beside her spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. Speaking of it, a family nearby married a woman who already had a child. She was nothing but a shameless woman who did not know how to behave as a wife. No one even knew which man had fathered her bastard, yet she still went into another household and threw her weight around. How disgraceful. That maid had sticky fingers. I had previously sent her to Shuntian Prefecture, but Lu Yanshu had found a way to retrieve her. To his credit, he had still understood the seriousness of the matter and banished her to a rural estate. Yet 2 days earlier, Lu Yanran had called her back, claiming that pregnancy made her ill and that she could eat only almond pastries prepared by that particular maid. The two of them had come today for one purpose, to give me a show of force and make me understand who truly occupied the Marquise's heart. Kuiping was so furious that both hands shook. She almost rushed after them to tear them apart, but I stopped her. Young mistress, how can you tell me not to take issue with her? I truly cannot let this insult go. What gives her the right to speak of you that way? Tears poured down Kuiping's face. I knew she was angry because she genuinely cared for me, so I took her hand and spoke softly. Why become so upset over a fool whose every thought is written plainly on her face? The monthly allowances will be distributed in 2 days. Are you telling me you cannot deal with her then? Kuiping's eyes immediately lit up. 3 days later, when the household allowances were distributed, I gave Lu Yanran the customary 10 taels of silver. Lu Yanshu had previously supplemented her allowance in secret, drawing the extra money from the manor's public accounts. But the deficit had not yet been filled, so I had frozen all withdrawals from those accounts. 10 taels was barely enough for her personal spending. It was not even sufficient to reward her servants. Within days, she grew anxious. That afternoon, I had just left the treasury and was crossing the 9-turn bridge in the garden when Liu Yanran appeared from nowhere carrying a bowl of bird's nest soup. Elder sister, I stewed this bird's nest for you with my own hands. She approached in great haste. Just as she reached me, her foot suddenly slipped and she fell heavily to the ground. Her scream startled every bird in the manor into flight. Lu Yanshu arrived with remarkable speed. It was precisely the hour when he normally returned from his office. Clearly, Liu Yanran had calculated everything in advance. He shoved me hard aside, then hurriedly gathered Liu Yanran into his arms. Even his voice trembled. Yanran, what happened? Where does it hurt? Tears streamed down Lu Yanran's deathly pale face. My lord, I brought bird's nest soup for elder sister. I do not know how elder sister did not do it deliberately. Please do not blame her. Kuiping immediately stepped in front of me. Concubine Liu, what nonsense are you saying? You clearly slipped by yourself. Before she could finish, Lu Yanshu cut her off. Silence. Who gave you the right to speak here? I pulled Kuiping back to my side. Lu Yanshu's furious gaze immediately fixed upon me. Shen Qinglan, I do not care how you torment the servants in this household, but if you dare touch Yanran, I will make you pay. Liu Yanran lay in his arms and sobbed weakly. My lord, do not say any more. I was careless. It had nothing to do with Madame. Lu Yanshu looked both heartbroken and enraged. You are only 4 months pregnant. She plainly tried to kill both you and the child, yet you still defend her? Every maid and matron nearby lowered her head. Not daring even to breathe loudly, I leaned against the railing and rubbed my back, which still ached from the impact. My voice remained perfectly calm. Send for Imperial Physician Zhou to examine concubine Liu. Lu Yanshu stopped short. He had probably not expected me to offer no defense at all. She herself said I did not push her. What use is there in standing here blaming me instead of calling a physician? Looking at his baffled face, I suddenly felt a little pity for him. No wonder Liu Yanran could wrap him around her little finger when he was foolish to this extent. Fortunately, after Imperial Physician Zhou took Liu Yanran's pulse, he concluded that she remained healthy. The fall had only mildly disturbed the pregnancy, and 2 doses of medicine to stabilize the fetus would be enough. Lu Yanshu visibly breathed a sigh of relief. Immediately afterward, however, he turned to me. Do not think you have escaped punishment simply because Yanran is unharmed this time. Our household has never had a mistress who treated human life so lightly. Go to the ancestral hall and accept punishment today. I could not be bothered with him. I turned and returned to my own courtyard. By evening, when he learned that I still had not gone to the ancestral hall, Lu Yanshu stormed over. Before he could open his mouth, I handed him the contract we had signed. My lord seems to have a very short memory. Read the agreement again. You signed it and marked it with your own fingerprint. I had made him write clearly that Liu Yanran and I were forbidden to deliberately approach or disturb each other. If either side initiated contact, that side would bear full responsibility for everything that followed. Lu Yanshu's expression immediately became unpleasant. Concubine Liu herself admitted that she made soup and brought it to me. What a joke. I have more than enough maids and matrons to serve me. Why would I need her to cook for me? I left him choking on his anger. You truly cannot tell kindness from malice. I had no desire to argue. I merely told him to take our agreement back and read it aloud to Liu Yanran several more times. He left with a dark expression, but I never let a grievance go unanswered. I would not accept today's humiliation without an answer. Whoever broke an agreement had to pay the price. 3 days later, the censor's residence held a flower viewing banquet. Lu Yanshu was dragged off drinking by his colleagues. During the gathering, someone proposed that they go to Spring Breeze Pavilion to hear music. Everyone else took out silver, but after searching every pocket, Lu Yanshu found only 2 taels in loose silver. At Spring Breeze Pavilion, that amount could not even buy a pot of tea. The servant accompanying him stammered that he had brought no money either. Lu Yanshu returned to the manor with a livid face and kicked open the door to my courtyard. Shen Qinglan, I was feeding Xiaobao porridge and did not even raise my head. You are back, my lord. Have you eaten lunch? Do not pretend ignorance with me. He strode forward, but when he saw Xiaobao watching him, he unconsciously lowered his voice and softened his expression a little. Why did you cut off my monthly allowance? Do you know how thoroughly I was humiliated today? Of course I know. I passed the bowl to Nanny Chen and had Kuping carry Xiaobao away. Then I slowly wiped my hands. My calmness enraged him all over again. His face flushed scarlet as he pointed at me. You. I looked at him in puzzlement. My lord, was the loss of a little dignity truly so unbearable? He hesitated. When you broke our agreement and allowed Concubine Liu to come provoke me, I lost dignity before the servants as well. That placed me in a very difficult position. He was speechless. Perhaps he had never imagined that I had cut his allowance solely because of that incident. Just for that? Shen Qinglan, I have never suffered such humiliation in my life. Very well. Excellent. Shen Qinglan, you are truly formidable. He flung his sleeves and stormed away. Kuping poked her head out from the adjoining room. Madam, will the Marquis be all right? He will be fine. Some people never understand pain until the stick lands on their own backs, nor will they understand rules until then. After that, the manor remained peaceful for more than 2 months. Before long, the capital welcomed the Crown Prince's grand wedding. Civil and military officials alike brought their families into the palace for the ceremony. The Jinan Marquis household also received an invitation. Lu Yanshu had not wanted to take me, but I was his principal wife, and on such an occasion he did not dare violate protocol. He had no choice but to bring me. On the day of the ceremony, I wore the full formal court dress appropriate to a marchioness. The phoenix coronet was so heavy that my neck ached beneath it. When the ceremonial officer called for the titled ladies to enter and pay their respects, I followed the others step by step into the Hall of Supreme Harmony. Golden lacquer gleamed throughout the hall, and red silk streamed down from the rafters. The crown prince stood upon the raised imperial platform in a dark ceremonial robe. I could not see his face clearly, but that straight, familiar back made my eyelids twitch twice. At the master of ceremonies' call, the crown prince slowly turned around. It was a face I knew more intimately than any other. No wonder I had searched for him so long without finding the slightest clue. Who could have imagined that the lover I had once kept in a secluded residence, the man who vanished without saying farewell, was the crown prince himself? It would be a lie to say I did not panic. The moment I remembered the outrageous things I had done with him during that period, I could hardly blame him for leaving without a word. Now that I thought about it, after recovering his memory, he had shown extraordinary mercy merely by not having me hacked to pieces at once. My mind was in dreadful turmoil. Fortunately, everyone around me knelt at that exact moment and cried in unison, "Long live His Highness the Crown Prince!" I followed the tide, dropping to my knees and blending into the crowd. The wedding rites dragged on endlessly and nearly drained all my strength. At last, the crown prince took the crown princess by the hand and led her step by step onto the platform to receive the obeisance of the officials. When the master of ceremonies proclaimed that the rites were complete, I finally breathed a sigh of relief and followed the officials and titled ladies out of the great hall. Claiming that I felt unwell, I did not join the other ladies at the banquet in the side hall. I hurried to leave the palace instead. Yet, as a palace maid guided me out, we turned a corner and encountered the crown prince speaking with someone else. I immediately lowered my eyes and bowed my head in a show of respect. After following the palace maid and saluting, I kept my head down and hurried past. All the way out, I felt as if thorns were pressing into my back. My heart remained uneasy. Still, my phoenix coronet was heavy and my head had stayed lowered. Surely he could not have recognized me. 3 years earlier, I had rescued a man from the riverbank when he was at death's door. His name was Xiao Mingxiu. The main reason I saved him was that even such terrible injuries could not hide his extraordinary beauty. Overcome by attraction, I dragged him back to my secluded residence. I used a great many rare medicines to snatch his life back from the King of Hell. The unfortunate part, or perhaps not entirely unfortunate, was that he had lost his memory. So I lied and told him that he was my husband and had married into my household, and that villains had attacked him while he was away on business. We lived then in a small country residence in Zhang. During the day, I reviewed accounts in the front courtyard while he recovered in the rear. Occasionally, he would lean on a cane and come over to bring me a cup of tea. My father was still alive at the time. On one visit, he frowned the instant he saw Xiao Mingxiu. "This man's origins are unknown. Do not give him your heart." I ignored him and continued deceiving Xiao Mingxiu into believing he was my husband. Once his injuries had nearly healed, he began helping me with my work of his own accord. He calculated accounts even faster than I did. A single glance at a ledger was enough for him to understand it, and he never made a mistake. He was astonishingly capable. I thought then that if he never recovered his memory and had nowhere else to go, there was nothing wrong with keeping him as my husband. I was my father's only daughter, and father had long said he would choose an obedient man to marry into our household. At that time, no matter how I looked at him, Xiao Mingxiu seemed perfectly obedient. It did not take long for me to decide upon him. Once I made up my mind, I acted. Half coaxing and half coercing, I made him mine. He had an exceptionally beautiful body. After one taste, I became even more infatuated. Whenever I had time, I coaxed him into studying all manner of erotic picture books with me. I would tease him until his face turned crimson with embarrassment and anger. His mouth always protested that such behavior was utterly improper, yet his actions were anything but restrained. Unfortunately, one day I returned from the shop carrying an entire bag of the lotus blossom pastries he liked, only to find that he had disappeared. I guessed he had recovered his memory, but I could not accept that he had left without saying goodbye. I searched for him almost madly for more than a month. Only afterward did I discover that I was pregnant. My father nearly fainted from fury and tried to force me to end the pregnancy. I refused. "This child is mine alone. He will bear my surname Shen." Father called me foolish, but in the end, he loved me too much. He helped me conceal everything. After 10 months of pregnancy, I gave birth to Xiaobao. Yet, when Xiaobao was barely a month old, father suddenly fell gravely ill. Fewer than 5 days later, he passed away. The Shen clansmen descended like vultures. My eldest uncle, Shen Wanbai, led a crowd of relatives to block the mourning hall and force me to surrender all the Shen family's property. "You are a woman. You became pregnant without even marrying and brought disgrace upon the family. You are unworthy to inherit this estate. The Shen family's property must be managed by the entire clan." Before father's coffin had even been carried out, they stood before his memorial tablet dividing the inheritance among themselves. My body had still not recovered from childbirth. Even so, I stood alone in the morning hall facing a room full of wolves and tigers, not daring to retreat half a step. It would be false to say it was not difficult. But I had always understood one thing clearly. In this world, only what you can hold on to truly belongs to you. If you cannot protect or keep something, there is no use continuing to cling to it. I had never intended to become entangled with Xiao Mingxiu again. The politics of the imperial family were far too dangerous and treacherous. The fact that he had once been injured nearly to death was proof enough. All I wanted now was for Xiaobao to grow up safely and peacefully. Xiao Mingxiu was a living target. The farther away he stayed from us, the better. What I did not expect was that even after I married into the Marquis household, my insatiably greedy uncle would still dare come looking for trouble. His timing, however, was convenient. I had recently put the manor's affairs in order and had been searching for an opportunity to speak properly with him. Since he had delivered himself to my door, he had spared me some effort. That day, I was examining the accounts when Kuiping rushed in. "Madam, the eldest master has come. He brought many people and is causing a disturbance in the front hall." I set down the ledger and wiped my hands. "Where is the Marquis?" Concubine Liu wanted the 8-treasure duck from Drunken Fragrance restaurant. The Marquis went to buy it for her. His timing was impeccable. When I reached the front hall, Shen Wanbai was already sitting arrogantly in the seat of honor. More than 10 Shen clansmen stood on either side of him, making the spacious hall feel crowded and oppressive. I maintained a measured smile. "What wind has brought eldest uncle here today?" Shen Wanbai took a sip of tea and slowly set down his cup. "Little N, your uncle has come today to settle a debt with you." "Yes?" When father died, Shen Wanbai had seen that I no longer had anyone behind me. He openly seized a number of my farms and shops and forced me to hand over the deeds. At the time, I stood alone and weak, so I had no choice but to avoid confronting him directly and move to the capital. "When your father conducted business, he used money from the clan's common treasury," Shen Wanbai said. "At least 300,000 taels. He borrowed that money from the Shen clan. Now that he is dead, you must repay the debt." I sneered inwardly. For nearly a year, they had failed to extract any advantage from me. It seemed desperation had finally driven them to invent such an absurd excuse. All the Shen clan's common properties together earned less than 5,000 taels a year. Where could they possibly have found 300,000 taels to lend my father? "Eldest uncle, words alone are not evidence. You cannot make father owe you 300,000 taels merely by saying so." "You still refuse to admit it?" Shen Wanbai pulled an old account book from his sleeve and slammed it onto the table. "It is written here in black and white. Your father's withdrawals from the common treasury are clearly recorded. You are a married daughter. What propriety is there in allowing a woman like you to control the Shen family's property? Hand over the shops, farmland, and established trade names, and we will consider the debt erased." As soon as he finished, several men behind him stepped forward. They were all strong, young clansmen. It seemed they intended to begin with civility and end with force. "Does eldest uncle intend to rob me openly?" "You cannot put it that way." Shen Wanbai smiled. "Your uncle is giving you a chance to preserve your dignity. It was improper for you to take property purchased with clan funds as your dowry. If you still refuse to surrender it, do not blame me for showing no mercy." Whispers came from outside. I glanced over and saw maids and servants of the Marquis household peeking through the doorway to watch the commotion. "Oh my, what is happening here?" Liu Yanran's soft voice floated in from outside, carrying the pleasure of someone watching a show. Supporting her visibly rounded belly, she entered slowly on her maid's arm. "Elder sister, there are guests in the house, yet you have not even ordered tea. It would be unfortunate if outsiders mocked the Marquis household for lacking manners." Then she nodded toward Shen Wanbai. "Eldest uncle, I am pregnant, so please excuse me from a formal bow." Shen Wanbai hurriedly waved his hands. "No need, no need." Liu Yanran turned back to me with a meaningful smile. "Elder sister, we are all family. Whatever the matter, it can be discussed slowly. Do not damage family harmony over it." I ignored her. Clearly, cutting her allowance had not taught her a lasting lesson. I sighed softly and looked at Shen Wanbai. "Eldest uncle, I will ask one final time. Did you come today determined to seize my property?" Shen Wanbai stood and pushed the old ledger toward me. "Your property? It belongs to the Shen clan. In any case, whether you wish to hand it over or not, today you will surrender it." At his signal, The clansman behind him pressed another step closer. Queeping was frightened and immediately placed herself in front of me. Just then, a low, forceful shout rang out from outside. More than 10 constables rushed into the hall with practice speed. Officers of Shuntian Prefecture are here on official business. Everyone unrelated, stand aside. I had to admit that the visiting card of the Marquis of Jinan still carried some weight. The prefectural authorities did not dare delay once they saw it. Officer, I said to the constable leading them, these people broke into the Marquis manor, tried to force me to surrender my dowry, and brought men prepared to use violence. In my capacity as the Marquess of Jinan, I report this crime and ask the authorities to deliver justice. Arrest them all. Beforehand, I had already sent Nanny Chen to make the necessary arrangements. Now, after hearing my accusation, the leading constable shouted the order without hesitation. Shen Wanbai's expression changed drastically. This is a family matter. Whether it is a family matter can be discussed at Shuntian Prefecture, I said, refusing to yield even half a step. The constables escorted Shen Wanbai and more than 10 clansmen away. Liu Yanran had never expected me to report them to the authorities. For a moment, she looked even more panicked than Shen Wanbai. Madame, have you gone mad? How could you call the authorities? Does the Marquis household no longer need its reputation? I gave a quiet laugh. She had dared encourage Shen Wanbai to lead men straight into the manor without fearing for its reputation. What did I have to fear? In the main courtroom of Shuntian Prefecture, Lord Zhao took his seat and struck the judicial block. Who stands below the court, and what complaint do you bring? As a titled noblewoman, I was not required to kneel. Still, to appear properly pitiful, I pinched myself several times until my eyes reddened. My lord, I am Shen Qinglan. My father, Shen Wanhai, left considerable property, all of which he designated as my dowry. It was duly registered with the authorities. Now my eldest paternal uncle, Shen Wanbai, covets my estate. Today he led men into the Marquis manor and tried to force me to surrender everything. I truly had nowhere else to turn. I beg your honor to deliver justice. Lord Zhao's face darkened. He turned to Shen Wanbai. Shen Wanbai, do you know the crime of breaking into a Marquis' residence? Shen Wanbai panicked. My lord, she is lying. That property belongs collectively to the Shen clan. It is not her private dowry. Before he died, her father took money from the family treasury and owed the clan 300,000 taels. She must acknowledge that debt. Do you have evidence? Shen Wanbai produced the old ledger. This is the evidence. Lord Zhao leafed through several pages and frowned. This is an internal account book of the Shen clan. It was never filed with any government office and cannot be admitted as legal evidence. Shen Wanbai froze. At that moment, I took 2 documents from my sleeve. My lord, this is the will my father wrote with his own hand before his death. It clearly states that all of the Shen family's business property belongs to me alone. 3 copies of the will were made. One is kept at the Suzhou prefectural office. Another was entrusted to my father's friend, Master Fu Qiao, as a witness. This copy bears the official seal of Suzhou Prefecture and is sufficient evidence. Master Fu Qiao? Do you mean the renowned painter and calligrapher? Lord Zhao was an avid collector of painting and calligraphy. Naturally, he deeply admired the famous Master Fu Qiao. I smiled. The very same. He was my father's closest friend. When I married, the old gentleman even gave me several paintings as wedding gifts. Lord Zhao's eyes immediately shone. Shen Wanbai sprang up. Impossible! How could that father and daughter possibly know Master Fu Qiao? Whether we knew him was not truly important. What mattered was that I genuinely possessed his paintings, and Lord Zhao already believed me. Lord Zhao struck the judicial block and ordered Shen Wanbai to be silent. At that moment, I presented the rest of my evidence. This is the dowry registration I filed with the prefectural office before my marriage. It is written clearly, bears the official seal, and may be examined by your honor. Lord Zhao accepted the document and inspected it carefully. A moment later, he struck the block again. Shen Wanbai, the Shen estate has been clearly confirmed as Shen Qinglan's dowry and was registered with the government. On what grounds do you still attempt to seize it by force? Cold sweat covered Shen Wanbai's face. My lord, my younger brother was deceived by this girl. Deceived? Lord Zhao laughed coldly. Your brother's will is written in clear and orderly strokes. The witnesses, seals, and fingerprints are all present. How was he deceived? The spectators could no longer restrain their laughter. A father leaves his property to his daughter, and that means he was deceived? Would it be proper only if he left it to you? Exactly. How can he even say such a thing? Shen Wanbai was left speechless. Lord Zhao then pronounced judgment. You broke into a marquis's residence and falsely accused the Marchioness of Jinan. Under the law, you will receive 20 strokes as a warning to others. Shen Wanbai went deathly pale. My lord, I was deceived by someone else. Lord Zhao ignored him. The 20 strokes were delivered without mercy. By the end, Shen Wanbai was barely conscious, breathing in shallow gasps, and had to be carried away. As he passed me, I heard him mutter weakly, "That wretched woman said this girl had no one to support her? Said the Marquis would not care? So I see." When I returned to the manor, Lu Yanshu was still absent. The 8-treasure duck from Drunken Fragrance restaurant apparently needed more time in the oven. Passing a peony garden, I turned into Lu Yanran's courtyard. When she saw me enter, she froze before quickly producing a smile. Elder sister, you are back. How did matters at the prefectural office end? Eldest uncle, before she could finish, I raised my hand and slapped her across the face. I told you not to provoke me. Did you truly think Shen Qinglan was so easy to bully? I endured it once, then twice. Did you begin to imagine I was an easy target, a soft persimmon you could squeeze however you wished? I do not know what you are talking about. Liu Yanran glanced at the strong servants behind me, both furious and frightened. You incited my uncle to come here. You told him the Marquis would not protect me and urged him to use the opportunity to force me to surrender my property. Did you imagine that once my claws and teeth had been pulled, you could do whatever you pleased? Liu Yanran began to cry. What are you saying, elder sister? I am merely a woman confined to the inner household. How could I possibly know your uncle? I laughed coldly. If evidence is what you want, I will soon place it before you. I hope you will not regret it then. I turned and left. My desire to deal with Shen Wanbai's was one matter. Liu Yanran's attempt to exploit him against me was another. I did not care how she chose to stir up trouble, but she should never ever have tried to touch my estate, the things my father had left me. I placed all the witnesses and material evidence proving that Liu Yanran had incited my uncle before Lu Yanshu. If my lord cannot control his own people, I do not mind doing it for you. What do you think? His face turned livid as he examined each item of evidence. Then he rushed angrily to Liu Yanran's courtyard. I had assumed he intended to confront her. Instead, the moment Liu Yanran cried and fainted, he became overwhelmed with concern and immediately let the matter pass. Afterward, however, he returned and offered me a solemn apology on her behalf. He also promised that he would keep her under strict control and never allow anything similar to happen again. I had never placed much hope in him. This outcome was still better than nothing. Taking advantage of the moment, I asked him to visit Lord Zhao's residence for me. Although ours is not a true marriage, outsiders still regard us as one household. Lord Zhao handled this case impartially and helped me deal with the Shen clansmen, allowing me to recover the property they had seized. Shen Wanbai had nearly lost half his life. When I sent people to reclaim my estates and shops, no one else dared object. That success had come partly from borrowing the influence of the Marquis household. Since I had borrowed it once, I might as well make full use of it. As head of the household, my lord should also conduct the proper social courtesies on my behalf. Otherwise, people may criticize our manor for lacking manners. I have already prepared the gifts and reserved a private room at Drunken Fragrance restaurant. If your apology is sincere, please make this visit for me. That evening, Lu Yanshu returned smelling of wine. He had apparently enjoyed his conversation with Lord Zhao so much that the smile never left his face. He said Lord Zhao had been delighted with Master Fu Qiao's painting and had invited him to meet again for tea at a future gathering. He was also deeply grateful that I had sent someone ahead to tell him about Lord Zhao's interests and past experiences. Because of that preparation, he and Lord Zhao had found endless subjects to discuss. Lu Yanshu narrowed his slightly drunken eyes at me, gratitude filling them. No one ever taught me these things before. My mother died early, and as for my father, there is no need to speak of him. Shen Qinglan, thank you. The days passed slowly and steadily. One day, I went to a tea house to inspect the accounts. The moment Ah Fu saw me, he grinned so broadly he could not close his mouth. Proprietor, we bought the shops in the southern quarter. The price was 20% below the limit you gave us. My hand paused over the ledger. That trading firm finally yielded? More than yielded. Proprietor Zhou is under investigation for tax evasion and urgently needs money. He practically begged us to buy them. And there is more. That last shipment of tea, the official in charge at the pass was replaced, and the goods were cleared without a word. And there is also that cloth merchant who is always trying to squeeze us. Ah Fu was an agent I had sent to the capital several years earlier. His task was to gather every kind of useful information so that I could expand my business into the city. That was why he always heard news before anyone else. I interrupted him. Do you know who is helping us? Once or twice might be coincidence. 3 or 4 times means someone is doing it deliberately. Ah Fu looked nervous but excited. He glanced around and lowered his voice. The person in the Eastern Palace. I do not know when we first caught that nobleman's attention. For a long time I could find nothing. Only recently did I trace a few clues. He's also visits our tea house often. Each time he sits there for an entire afternoon. My eyelid twitched. My gaze moved involuntarily to the tea house across the street. He was there today as well, sitting in the same old place. I did not move. I merely leaned back lazily and stretched. So all these years, the reason I had established myself so smoothly in the capital and encountered so few obstacles was that he had been helping from the shadows. Why had he done it? Guilt? Compensation? He was certainly an interesting man, but I did not particularly care. Who would complain about an advantage that could be turned into profit? Still, I had lost all interest in checking the accounts. I decided to visit the cloth shop and choose several bolts of fabric for summer clothes for Xiaobao and me. As I left, the tea house manager hurried after me. Madam, I nearly forgot in all the bustle. This is a new black tea that just arrived from Fuzhou. We reserved it especially for you to taste. He handed Kuiping a jade green tea box. I nodded to him and climbed into the carriage. From the tea house across the street came what sounded like a porcelain cup shattering. Soon after my carriage entered a narrow alley, someone intercepted it. Before Kuiping could speak, she was struck unconscious. And Xiao Mingxiu, dressed entirely in black and wearing a complex expression, climbed inside. I was not surprised that he had come. Your Highness, what is the meaning of this? We are both intelligent people. There is no need to beat around the bush. He looked at me for a long time before asking hoarsely, Kinglin, do you still blame me? Compared with 2 years earlier, he had grown much thinner. How would I dare blame the Crown Prince? I displayed just the right amount of alarm. I truly had blamed him for leaving without farewell. I had resented him. But not long afterward I discovered that I had too much to do and no time left to blame or hate him. I had no desire to investigate whether he knew of my circumstances during those years. With or without him, those were hardships I had to face. I had lived very well without him. That meant he no longer had any hold over me. My attitude seemed impossible for him to believe. The pain in his eyes was almost tangible. Silence filled the carriage. Alain, why did you marry? Why could you not wait a little longer for me? I could not help laughing. There is something your Highness does not know. Had I not married the Marquis of Jing'an, I would never have entered the palace for your wedding. Naturally, I would also never have learned that the man I rescued was the present Crown Prince. People say truth can be stranger than fiction. It seems I have experienced that for myself. Besides, when your Highness left without a word, was that not because you wished to sever all ties with me? I possess a vast estate and must plan for my own future. Marrying another man was perfectly natural. He looked stunned. I clearly left a letter for you. I did not reveal my identity, but only later did I learn that he truly had left a letter. In it, he said that trouble had arisen in his family, and he had to return. He promised that if matters went quickly, he would return in 3 years, and that even if they took longer, he would still come back for me. But even knowing now that he had not vanished without farewell could no longer change anything. I was satisfied with my present life. I did not wish to be drawn into the struggle surrounding the Crown Prince's position. I therefore asked Xiao Mingxiu to forget me and let me go. His hands trembled with anger, but fortunately he did not make matters more difficult for me. After learning that Xiao Mingxiu was the Crown Prince, I had made discreet inquiries about the years since his return to the capital. I could not uncover everything, but I learned enough to know that his battle with the third prince had become a fight to the death. The third prince's faction had controlled the Ministry of Revenue for many years. Xiao Mingxiu had returned to the capital with neither troops nor money, yet had still managed to wrest a share of their power from them. Merely imagining it revealed how impossibly difficult those years must have been. I heard that he had faced danger many times and had nearly failed to survive on several occasions. That only strengthened my determination to keep my distance. A struggle for imperial power always ended in death or injury. I would not expose Xiaobao to any danger, but some things are like that. The more you worry about them, the more likely something is to go wrong. One day, shortly after I finished handling the manor's business, Nanny Chen rushed in with Xiaobao's wet nurse. The wet nurse said Xiaobao was missing. She had turned away only for an instant to fetch a handkerchief, and when she turned back he was gone. My limbs went weak. Had Kuiping not caught me, I would have collapsed to the floor. Young mistress, what should we do? Kuiping's anxious voice sounded beside me. I drew 2 deep breaths and forced myself to remain calm. Send all our people out to search. Inform Ah Fu and have his men make inquiries everywhere. Yes. Kuiping had been gone only a short while when Lu Yanshu returned to the manor. He knew how important Xiaobao was to me and did not delay. He immediately ordered every available servant to search for the young master. The manor was searched from top to bottom. Dozens of maids and household servants were sent into the streets, but none returned with news. Lu Yanshu led a group around the surrounding district. Then Lu Yanran's maid called him back, saying her mistress felt unwell. He went to see her twice, but soon returned to my courtyard. Do not worry. I have asked friends at the 5 cities military patrol and the Imperial City Bureau to help. There should be news soon. I had never expected Lu Yanshu to help me so much at such a time. Although he was a marquis, his household had long been removed from the capital's center of power. To persuade the Imperial City Bureau and the 5 cities military patrol to act, he would either have to spend money or beg favors. He had no obligation to do either, so I could not allow him to bear the cost. Thank you for everything you have done for Xiaobao, my lord. Whatever expenses arise, you may collect them from Mr. Hu in the accounting office. Lu Yanshu stared at me. Anger suddenly appeared on his face, but when he saw how exhausted I looked, he suppressed it and sounded aggrieved. I am helping you find Xiaobao, not doing it for money. Only then did I understand that he had misunderstood me. I thanked him with even greater sincerity. I know you are not doing this for money, but moving through the capital often requires silver to open doors. I only want Xiaobao found quickly, and I want your efforts to proceed smoothly without being delayed by anyone. He paused. After a moment he coughed lightly. You may rest assured. Even if I cannot turn the entire capital upside down, I will find Xiaobao for you. His voice was so sincere and solemn that my nose stung, and I nearly burst into tears. What I never expected was that Xiaobao would be with Xiao Mingshu. Xiao Mingshu said he had found the child on Mingda Street, 2 streets away from the west side gate of the manor. How could Xiaobao have reached such a place? Perhaps exhausted from playing, the child was now curled in Xiao Mingshu's arms, sleeping deeply with a faint smile on his lips, as though dreaming of something pleasant. I took Xiaobao from him. My heart held nothing but relief at recovering my missing son. Xiao Mingshu stood on the steps and watched me intently. His gaze moved from the child to my face. Whose son is he? How old is he? I froze. How had I forgotten that Xiaobao and Xiao Mingshu were father and son? When I did not answer, he turned his attention to Kuiping. You, tell me. Kuiping already knew that Xiao Mingshu was the crown prince. At his command, she startled, and immediately looked at me. I handed Xiaobao to her. Take Xiaobao back to his room. Xiao Mingshu moved to stop her, but I stepped between them with a smile. Your Highness, the child is tired. He stared at me. Who is his father, Xiaobao? Xiaobao is mine. He is my son. At that moment, Lu Yanshu hurried back. He glanced at me twice. Seeing the gratitude in my face, he stepped even more firmly in front of me. Your Highness, Xiaobao is my son. If you do not believe me, you may examine the genealogy of the Lu clan. Although Lu Yanshu and I had quarreled many times over Lu Yanran, he was a man who kept his word. From the moment I took over the household, he had begun the process of adding Xiaobao's name to the genealogy. At first, several Lu clan elders refused to admit a child of unclear origin into the ancestral line. Lu Shu visited them repeatedly and finally persuaded them. Afterward, he went to Shuntian Prefecture to register Xiaobao's household status. In other words, Xiaobao was now legally the legitimate eldest son of the Jinan Marquis household. Xiao Mingshu stared at me. You have been married for only a few months. How could you already have a child this old? Lu Yanshu was visibly flustered. I quietly took his arm, then met Xiao Mingshu's gaze without wavering. There is something your highness does not know. My husband and I pledged ourselves to each other long ago. Xiaobao was conceived years before our public wedding. A flicker of pain crossed Xiao Mingshu's eyes, but I paid it no attention. At present, he could bring Xiaobao and me nothing except disaster. I would never gamble with my son's safety. Once again, Xiao Mingshu left in anger. Lu Yanshu escorted me back to my courtyard. Before leaving, he hesitated for a long time. At last, as though he had made a difficult decision, he said, "The Marquis household cannot compare with the Eastern Palace. But as long as you remain my wife and are willing to stay here, I will keep you and Xiaobao safe." I was surprised that after learning of the entanglement between Xiao Mingshu and me, he could still say such words. The Jinan Marquis household had declined so far that no one would consider it capable of opposing the crown prince. The conflict on Lu Yanshu's face had not entirely faded. For that very reason, the sincerity in his eyes seemed even more precious. I gave him a genuine bow. Thank you, my lord. What I did not expect was that Liu Yanran had arranged Xiaobao's disappearance from beginning to end. It had not been an elaborate scheme. an inconspicuous gardener in the manor, had taken advantage of the wet nurse's momentary inattention, hidden Xiaobao inside a sack used for weeds, carried him out, and abandoned him on the street. When Liu Yanshu discovered the truth, he sat in his study for a long time before going to Liu Yanran's courtyard. Afterward, Liu Yanran was confined. That same afternoon, the steward even led a group of masons to seal the double doors of her courtyard. They left only a small serving hatch through which food and necessities could be passed. At dusk, Liu Yanshu came to apologize, looking exhausted and ashamed. "It was my fault. I failed to restrain her, and that is why I could offer neither comfort nor forgiveness. I did not dare imagine what might have happened had Xiaobao not encountered Xiao Mingxiu. Even so, Liu Yanshu's willingness to go this far exceeded my expectations. I could see his pain and lingering attachment to Liu Yanran. Yet during these months, it was also because of me that he had escaped the crushing weight of his debts and preserved the ancestral foundation of his family. Perhaps gratitude had enabled him to keep the promise between us." He bowed deeply. "Nothing like this will ever happen again." My thoughts were tangled, and for a time I did not know how to answer. I assumed the matter had ended now that Liu Yanran was confined. Yet 2 days later, during the Grand Court audience, the third prince's faction submitted a memorial accusing the crown prince of forcibly taking a minister's wife and corrupting moral virtue. The third prince spoke with righteous conviction and declared that Liu Yanshu's beloved concubine had witnessed the matter with her own eyes. Liu Yanshu was summoned to the Hall of Supreme Harmony without understanding what had happened. When the full story was explained, he stood stunned. But perhaps he feared that Liu Yanran would be convicted of deceiving the emperor and executed. He therefore had no choice but to tell the truth and admit that I was the woman who had rescued the crown prince years earlier. Beyond that, he dared say nothing. Unfortunately, the third prince had also uncovered Mingxiu's secret assistance to my businesses. It was treated as conclusive evidence of an improper relationship between us. The emperor berated Xiao Mingxiu furiously, then ordered him to surrender all state affairs under his control and reflect upon his misconduct. When the news reached the manor, Kuiping's face went white with fear. "Young mistress, what should we do?" Perhaps I had always known such a day might come. When it finally did, I remained calm enough to finish reading an entire ledger before ordering Kuiping to prepare the carriage for the tea house. As expected, Xiao Mingxiu was there. The moment he saw me, he froze. "Qinglan," he looked utterly dejected, as though every trace of energy had been drained from him. "Your Highness has pushed me into the center of this storm. Do you now intend to stand aside and watch?" From the moment our past was deliberately exposed, Xiao Mingxiu and I became bound to the same fate. If the third prince won, neither Xiaobao nor I would likely meet a good end. Xiao Mingxiu smiled bitterly, his voice hoarse. "Is that truly what you think of me?" His gaze was tender, infatuated, and profoundly intense. Had I still been an inexperienced young girl, perhaps such a look would have made me blush. Unfortunately for him, I had already investigated the truth. Before leaving years ago, he had indeed written me a letter. A young woman at the residence who secretly loved him had burned it before it reached me. The situation was almost laughable. She had said that I should not bind him. But reality had proved that I was never capable of holding him back. His heart held the entire realm. How could he allow romantic love to delay his steps? I sat across from him and filled his cup with tea. "Your Highness, do not tell me you acted this way merely because I broke your heart and left you without the will to pursue your future. I did not care that people outside were calling me greedy, wanton, and flirtatious. If those rumors were used well, they might even help me earn a great deal of money. Besides, history had always been written by the victor. What I needed to do was win." His pupils contracted, and his gaze became unfathomably deep. I covered my mouth with a soft laugh. "Your Highness, shall we make a transaction?" I absolutely did not believe that he would truly abandon the throne. Nor was I conceited enough to imagine that my rejection alone had destroyed his fighting spirit. If that were true, how could he have left so decisively years ago? How could he have remained completely silent for the past 2 years? He had simply feared that I might interfere with his greater undertaking. I could believe that this time he had intentionally dragged me into the vortex, hoping to force me back to his side, but that could never have been his ultimate goal. Since I could no longer sever every connection with him, I might as well help him reach the highest position. Perhaps he had also been waiting for me to submit voluntarily. He truly did not possess much money, while money was the one thing I never lacked. Half a month later, the crimes of the third prince, Xiao Mingyo, were exposed. He had embezzled military funds, colluded with enemies on the northern frontier, and exchanged army provisions for war horses. Ledgers, letters, sworn testimony, and the fingerprints of witnesses were presented one after another. Every item was irrefutable, striking directly at the third prince's most vulnerable point. The emperor's hands trembled after reading the memorial. "Rebellious son," he hurled it into the third prince's face, but Xiao Mingshu knew that this alone was still insufficient. The third prince had built his power at court over many years and possessed countless supporters. The emperor might curse him today, only for officials to plead on his behalf tomorrow. The matter could easily be smoothed over. Even now, despite the conclusive evidence, the emperor merely sent the third prince to the imperial prison and ordered the Ministry of Justice and the Court of Judicial Review to investigate quickly. The punishment was neither heavy nor light, and guilt had not yet been formally declared. Xiao Mingshu therefore said that to destroy the third prince completely, he had to make the third prince's supporters too frightened to defend him. The greatest reason the third prince could contend evenly with Xiao Mingshu was that the late empress had been dead for many years, and the influence of Xiao Mingshu's maternal family had gradually weakened. The third prince's mother, by contrast, was the emperor's most favored noble consort. Her father was Grand Tutor Li, whose power overshadowed the court. Grand Tutor Li had served as an official for 40 years and possessed innumerable students, protégés, and old allies. Together they formed an extraordinarily complex network. For Xiao Mingshu to shake that power was almost as difficult as climbing to heaven. But there was an old saying, money could move people. If someone remained unmoved, the benefit offered was simply not large enough. And what I possessed most abundantly was money enough to tip the balance. For several years, Ah Fu had operated a tea house and a theatrical troupe in the capital. Through them, he had gathered many secrets about court officials. We knew, for example, which official kept a secret mistress, who was herself a major criminal, whose offense could bring extermination upon her clan, whose son had abducted common women and treated human life as worthless, and who had accepted how much silver from whom to suppress monstrous crimes. With such matters as leverage, my money could be delivered precisely where it would have the greatest effect. After less than half a month of maneuvering, nearly all of the third prince's political support at court had been dismantled. No one expected that, once driven into a corner, the third prince would join forces with the noble consort, launch a coup, and surround the imperial palace. Xiao Mingshu, however, was one step ahead. Or perhaps he had long anticipated that the third prince would eventually try to seize the throne by force and had quietly laid his plans. When the third prince led troops into the emperor's bedchamber, Xiao Mingshu cut off the third prince's support and lured him into a trap from which he could not escape. In the end, Xiao Mingshu shot the third prince dead, inside the Hall of Supreme Harmony. The emperor, meanwhile, had drunk poisoned ginseng soup presented by the noble consort. His life hung by a thread. When Xiao Mingshu arrived, the emperor had only enough strength to hand him the Edict of Succession before breathing his last. Everything proceeded so smoothly that I could not help suspecting Xiao Mingshu had prepared for all of it long ago. 3 days later, after the enthronement ceremony, Xiao Mingshu summoned me to the palace. I bowed respectfully, but he pulled me directly into his arms. "Chong'an, enter the palace and stay beside me." I remained silent. Only when he released me did he discover that tears covered my face. "You promised to make me the foremost imperial merchant in the realm. Are you going to break your word now?" Years ago, he had promised that we would belong only to each other for life. He had promised to watch 100 flowers bloom with me in spring, and snowfall in winter. Yet the truth was that even when he left, he had carried countless secrets with him. "I am not breaking my word, I only want—" His voice died beneath my endlessly falling tears. I knew he could never endure seeing me cry. He had once said that every tear I shed seemed to tear his heart apart. At that moment, tears were the only weapon I had left. As expected, his eyes filled with anguish, and he drew me into his arms again. As emperor, he could never have only one woman. There was already the crown princess, and in time the imperial harem would be filled with consorts. I had money, leisure, and a good life. Why would I enter the palace and spend my whole existence waiting for one man, binding my honor, disgrace, and very life to him? The thought alone was terrifying. "Shen Chong'an." His voice was hoarse and laden with pain. "I always believed I had to move faster, then faster still. Once every danger around me had been cleared away, I could reunite with you. I did not dare think of you or listen for news of you. I feared I would be unable to stop myself from seeking you, and feared even more that I would bring fatal disaster upon you. Yet what I received in return was the news that you had married. My heart gave a sharp ache, and the tears that followed became a little more sincere. He gently wiped the unending tears from my cheeks and murmured, "During all these years, was there ever even a moment when you missed me?" I wanted to tell him that I had. While I was pregnant with Xiaobao, I imagined every day that I might open my eyes and find him standing beside the bed, drawing back the curtains with a branch of dew-covered crabapple blossoms in his hand. When I finally woke from my lazy sleep, he would sit before the mirror and paint my brows. Whenever I grew tired from reading the accounts, he would hold me against his chest, massaging my waist with one hand, while finishing the remaining work with the other. But waking from a dream only revealed that it had all been fantasy. After Xiaobao was born and father died, I no longer possessed the time or heart for such dreams. Fortunately, just as I was nearly unable to produce any more tears, Xiao Mingshu sighed softly and walked to the imperial desk. "Chong'an, grind ink for me one more time." His words brought back our days at the country residence. He had always been even better than I was at working through accounts. I often sprawled lazily across the table, pretending to grind ink while secretly looking him over from left to right. No matter how long I looked, it never seemed enough. Later, I would barely finish grinding the ink before dragging him away to do those outrageous things again. The memory left me even less capable of continuing to cry. He noticed my hesitation and laughed bitterly. Then he picked up the inkstick and ground it himself. The arrangement I had offered him was simple. I would become his purse and solve his shortage of silver, while he would name the Shen family the foremost imperial merchants in the realm. I had not expected him to do far more. In addition to granting the Shen family that distinction, he ennobled me as Lady of Anping County, with a fief of 300 households and an annual grain stipend of 800 standard measures. He appointed me Commissioner of the Commercial Administration Bureau at the principal third rank, bestowed on me a golden fish-shaped insignia pouch, permitted me to take part in court deliberations, and allowed me to submit memorials directly to the emperor. As I accepted the decree and prepared to leave, he suddenly called me back. "Xiaobao is our son, is he not?" Xiaobao's brows and eyes looked almost exactly like Xiao Mingshu's. He must have known the truth from the first glance. There was no longer any need to conceal it. I gave a quiet murmur of assent. He said nothing more and silently allowed me to leave. Earlier, when the third prince submitted the accusation that Xiao Mingshu had been conducting an affair with a minister's wife, Lu Yanshu had exposed me in order to protect Lu Yanran. Everything he said had been true, but after he indulged Lu Yanran again and again, I had completely lost faith in him. For nearly a month, I had therefore taken firm control of the Jinan Marquis household. What needed to be sold was sold. Anyone who deserved to be handed to the authorities was handed over. Lu Yanshu did not object even once. After learning that I had allied myself with the crown prince, he feared that his own actions might cause me further trouble, so he shut his doors and ceased going out. As for Lu Yanran, when the third prince's faction was purged, she had already guessed what her end might be. The terror caused her to miscarry. More than half a month later, she still lay bedridden and could not get out of bed. Lu Yanshu remained beside her and cared for her. Only today, when everything had finally been settled, did he hand me a letter of divorce by mutual consent. "You no longer need to borrow the name of the Marquis household. This was only a partnership from the beginning, yet I have repeatedly become a burden to you. I am truly too ashamed to face you." His eyes reddened as he spoke. I sighed inwardly. I knew he was not evil by nature. No one had sincerely guided him during all those years, and that was how he had become so confused and misguided. I could only hope he would live with clearer judgment in the future. I reached for the divorce letter, but he held it tightly and would not release it. At last he let go. He watched me sign my name. Only when I had finished it, he said in a trembling voice, "I will work to repay the silver I owe you as soon as possible." "There is no need, my lord. We made an agreement at the beginning, and you fulfilled everything you were required to do. I have no reason to take that money back." He shook his head with a bitter smile. "I did nothing well. Do not make excuses for me." After his emotions had calmed a little, I asked, "What do you intend to do now?" He held only a minor administrative post in the Ministry of War. Although the title of Marquis of Jinan still gave him some protection, his prospects were poor. Moreover, Lu Yanran had previously betrayed Xiao Mingshu. Lu Yanshu's future in the capital would likely be even more difficult. At the question, his eyes suddenly became clear and bright, as though he had decided long ago. "I have thought it through. I want to request an appointment outside the capital." "Where?" "The south." That was scarcely different from exile. Perhaps he knew what I was thinking, because he suddenly smiled. If the Liu family wishes to restore its former glory, there is no hope left in the capital. I might as well risk everything somewhere else. I knew I could not dissuade him, so I said no more. I only hoped the rest of his life would be peaceful and successful. Before Liu Yanshu departed, Liu Yanran finally recovered from her illness. She packed her belongings as though she were walking toward an entirely new life. She followed Liu Yanshu out of the capital. Before leaving, she came to see me but said only one sentence. In the end, I still won. Many years later, Xiao Mingxiu died suddenly and passed the throne to Xiao Bao. I became the Empress Dowager. One day, with nothing else to do, I received a letter from Liu Yanran. Tear stains and blood marked the mottled paper. She had written, Shen Qinglan, in the end you were the one who won. Liu Yanshu remembered you until the day he died. I sighed softly and remembered how Liu Yanshu had gone south years earlier. Beginning as a minor official, he had advanced step by step until he became the widely praised Lord Liu. Throughout those years, he devoted himself wholeheartedly to serving the common people. Yet every year without fail, he sent me several dozen taels of silver. He always said that one day he would repay the entire debt. I could not argue him out of it. I could only instruct the managers of my shops in the south to look after him whenever possible. Even so, illness took him far too early. In the end, everyone has their own fate. As Lady of Anping County and Commissioner of the Commercial Administration Bureau, I served for many years. I would not claim any illustrious achievements, but I did train a capable group of talented women. They took their places throughout every vital sector of Great Yang's economy. I believe that, with these women as examples, women throughout the realm would gradually forge brilliant paths of their own. One day, no one would again say, "What a pity you were born a woman." We too could stand proudly beneath heaven and earth, achieve distinction, and build great careers.